rich experience and a deep commitment to public service, she has contributed significantly to policy development and inclusive planning in our state. We welcome you, ma'am. We are honored to welcome our distinguished speakers, Justice K. Chandru, former judge of the Madras High Court, known for his judgments that strengthened civil liberties and social justice. His career reflects a deep commitment to constitutional values and human rights. I welcome you to this program, sir. Professor Gopal Guru, former professor at the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and former editor of the Economic and Political Weekly. He is widely respected for his scholarship on democracy, ethics, and social justice. I welcome you to this program, sir. Dr. Meera Velayudan, the former president of the Indian Association for Women's Studies and a noted scholar in feminist and social justice discourses. Her work has significantly contributed to advancing gender equity and women's empowerment in India. I warmly welcome you to this program, ma'am. Professor Virginis Kaka is a visiting professor at the Institute for Human Development, New Delhi, and a leading scholar on tribal studies and social transformation. His research has shaped national discourse on marginalized communities. I welcome you to this program, sir. Advocate Irfan Engineer, the director of the Center for Study of Society and Secularism, and a prominent voice on communal harmony and constitutional rights. His work focuses on strengthening secularism and social cohesion. I welcome you to this program, sir. Professor Gidan Choi Sahu, professor at the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies, School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. His work links environmental justice with social equity and public policy. I welcome you to this program, sir. We also extend a warm welcome to Dr. A. Kaushigan, IAS, Secretary, Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes and Backward Classes Development Department, who will present the summary of this session. We welcome you, sir. With this, I once again extend a warm welcome to all the speakers and delegates present here and look forward to a rich, thoughtful, and insightful discussion. We also welcome the directors of different respective departments coming under social empowerment. We are honored to have such an eminent panelist, and I am confident this session will offer valuable insights into the challenges and possibilities of social empowerment. Thank you. And handing over the session to the moderator, Dr. P.K. Jamila.
Thank you, Josephine. Now I invite Sri K. Rajan, Honorable Minister for Revenue, for his address. Sir.
വേദിയിലും സദസ്സിലുമുള്ള ഏറ്റവും ബഹുമാന്യരെ, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ടവരെ, ഈ സെമിനാറിൻ്റെ ഉള്ളടക്കത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ആമുഖമായി സംസാരിക്കുന്ന ആളുകളെ പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് നടത്തിയിട്ടുള്ള ഭാഷണത്തിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നല്ലതുപോലെ ബോധ്യപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടാകും. കേരളത്തിലെ ഗവൺമെൻറ് ജനാധിപത്യത്തിലും വികസനത്തിലും ഊന്നി സാർവദേശീയ തലത്തിലെ ഒരു കോൺഫറൻസിലൂടെ 2031 നമ്മുടെ ഒരു വിഷൻ, കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ കാഴ്ചപ്പാട് ഏറ്റവും ശക്തമായി പൊതുസമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ മുമ്പിൽ അവതരിപ്പിക്കുകയും വളരെ പ്രൊമിനൻ്റായിട്ടുള്ള പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റീസ്, ശ്രദ്ധേയരായിട്ടുള്ള സാമൂഹ്യ ജീവിതത്തിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ തലങ്ങളെയും ബന്ധപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടുള്ള വളരെ പ്രമുഖരായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രഭാഷകരുടെയും ആക്ടിവിസ്റ്റുകളുടെയും ഒക്കെ അനുഭവങ്ങളുടെ കൂടി അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിൽ അത് നിരീക്ഷിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. ബഹുമാനായ സ്പോർട്സ് ന്യൂനപക്ഷ കാര്യ വകുപ്പ് മന്ത്രി ശ്രീ ബി അബ്ദുൾ റഹ്മാൻ കൂടി ഇതിൻ്റെ തുടക്കത്തിൽ തന്നെ എത്തിച്ചേർന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഞങ്ങൾ ദീർഘമായി സംസാരിച്ച് ബാക്കിയുള്ള ആളുകളെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കേൾക്കാനുള്ള അവസരം നിഷേധിക്കുകയോ ആ വിധത്തിൽ ഉയർന്നു വരേണ്ട ഒരു ചർച്ചയ്ക്ക് ഏതെങ്കിലും വിധത്തിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ അഭിപ്രായം രേഖപ്പെടുത്തി തടസ്സം നിൽക്കുകയോ ചെയ്യാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നില്ല. ഒരു കാര്യം ഉറപ്പാണ്, സാമൂഹ്യ ശാക്തീകരണം എന്ന ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു മുദ്രാവാക്യത്തെ എക്കാലത്തും ഹൃദയത്തിലേറ്റി പോകുന്ന ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനമാണ് കേരളം. സാമൂഹ്യവും സാമ്പത്തികവുമായിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ മേഖലകളിലും സമത്വവും നീതിയും ഉറപ്പാക്കി നൽകുക എന്ന ഭരണകൂടത്തിൻ്റെ കർത്തവ്യം ഭരണഘടന നിർദ്ദേശിക്കപ്രകാരം തന്നെ നടപ്പിലാക്കുക എന്നുള്ളത് മുഖ്യ ലക്ഷ്യമായി കാണുന്ന ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനമാണ് കേരളം. കേരളം പക്ഷേ അതിഭീകരമായിട്ടുള്ള അവഗണനയുടെയും വലിയ വിധത്തിലുള്ള ജാതി സ്പർദ്ധയുടെയും ഒക്കെ കേന്ദ്രമായി നിരുന്ന ഒരു കാലമുണ്ട്. നികുതി അടയ്ക്കാനും വോട്ട് ചെയ്യാനും പൗരാവകാശങ്ങളോടെ ജീവിക്കാനും മലയാളിക്ക് അവസരമില്ലാതിരുന്നൊരു കാലത്താണ് സ്വാമി വിവേകാനന്ദൻ കേരളത്തെ ഭ്രാന്താലയം എന്ന് വിളിച്ച ഇരുണ്ട കാലമുണ്ടായത്. പൊതുവഴികളിൽ നടക്കാനും പൊതുകുളങ്ങളിൽ കുളിക്കാനും അമ്പലത്തിൽ കിടന്ന് ആരാധന നടത്താനും പള്ളിക്കൂടത്തിൻ്റെ ബെഞ്ചിലിരുന്ന് പഠിക്കാനും മരിച്ചാൽ കുഴിച്ചിടാനും ജീവിച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന കാലത്ത് മണ്ണിൽ മാടം കെട്ടാനും മലയാളിക്ക് അധികാരം നിഷേധിച്ചിരുന്ന അപകടകരമായിട്ടുള്ള ആ ഭൂതകാലത്തിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ വഴികളിൽ നിന്നും കേരളത്തെ മാറ്റി നടത്തപ്പെട്ടത് 1957 ബാലറ്റ് പേപ്പറിലൂടെ അധികാരത്തിൽ വന്ന ഐക്യ കേരളത്തിലെ ആദ്യത്തെ ഗവൺമെൻറ് മുതൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടുള്ള സാമൂഹ്യ ശാക്തീകരണത്തിൻ്റെ ഏറ്റവും ശക്തമായിട്ടുള്ള ഇടപെടലുകളിലൂടെ തന്നെയാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്, സാമൂഹികമായും സാമ്പത്തികമായും ഉൾപ്പെടെ എല്ലാ മേഖലകളിലും സമത്വവും നീതിയും ഉറപ്പാക്കി നൽകുക എന്ന ഭരണകൂട ചുമതല ഭരണഘടന നിർദ്ദേശിക്കപ്പെടും പ്രകാരം തന്നെ മുന്നോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോവുകയാണ് കേരളത്തിലെ ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ ലക്ഷ്യം. കിടപ്പാടവും ദാരിദ്ര്യവും ജാതിയും വിദ്യാഭ്യാസവും തുടങ്ങി വ്യത്യസ്തങ്ങളായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങളെ അഭിസംബോധന ചെയ്ത് സ്ത്രീകളും കുട്ടികളും ഭിന്നശേഷിക്കാരും തുടങ്ങിയവർക്കെല്ലാം തുല്യ അവകാശവും അവസരങ്ങളും ലഭിക്കേണ്ട ഒരു ജനാധിപത്യ സമൂഹത്തെയാണ് കൂടുതൽ കെട്ടുറപ്പോടെ കൂടുതൽ ശരിയായ വഴികളിലൂടെ നമുക്ക് നിശ്ചയിക്കാനുള്ളത്. ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മറ്റു പല സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്കും മാതൃകയായ ഒരു കേരള മോഡൽ നാം അവതരിപ്പിക്കുന്നത് കേരളത്തിലെ പുരോഗമന ഗവൺമെൻറ്റുകൾ മുന്നോട്ട് വെച്ചുകൊണ്ടുള്ള ഈ ആശയത്തിൻ്റെ കൂടി അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലായിരുന്നു എന്ന് തന്നെയാണ് ഞങ്ങൾക്കെല്ലാവർക്കും ബോധ്യമാകുന്ന കാര്യം. ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ എല്ലാ സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിലും സാധ്യമാകാത്ത സാമൂഹികക്ഷേമ പെൻഷനുകളുടെ വിതരണം, തൊഴിലില്ലായ്മ വേതനം, പട്ടയമേളകൾ, അതിദാരിദ്ര്യ നിർമ്മാർജ്ജനം, എല്ലാവർക്കും വീട് നൽകുന്ന ലൈഫ് എന്ന ഭവന പദ്ധതി, ഇങ്ങനെ വളരെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായിട്ടുള്ള ലോകത്തെ അത്ഭുതപ്പെടുത്തുന്ന വിധത്തിലുള്ള നടപടിക്രമങ്ങളിലേക്ക് കേരളം നേതൃത്വം നൽകുന്നത് സാമൂഹ്യനീതി അങ്ങനെ ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുക എന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ കൂടി അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലാണ്. കേരളത്തിലെ ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട ധനകാര്യ വകുപ്പ് മന്ത്രി കഴിഞ്ഞ തവണ അവതരിപ്പിച്ച ബഡ്ജറ്റിലൂടെ നമുക്കൊരു കാര്യം ബോധ്യപ്പെട്ടു. സാമൂഹികക്ഷേമ പെൻഷനുകൾ മുതൽ തൊഴിലാളി പെൻഷനുകളും സ്ത്രീ സുരക്ഷാ പദ്ധതിയുടെ ഭാഗമായി 35-നും 60-നും ഇടയിൽ വീട്ടുജോലി മാത്രം ചെയ്ത് പണമില്ലാതെ ഏതെങ്കിലും വിധത്തിലുള്ള സഹായമില്ലാതിരിക്കുന്ന സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് 1000 രൂപ സാമൂഹിക സുരക്ഷിതത്വമായി നൽകുന്നതുമടക്കമുള്ള പരിപാടികളെടുത്ത് പരിശോധിച്ചപ്പോൾ 3.25 കോടിയോളം വരുന്ന മലയാളിയിൽ 1 കോടി ആളുകളെങ്കിലും വിവിധങ്ങളായിട്ടുള്ള സർക്കാർ സാമ്പത്തിക സഹായങ്ങൾക്ക് വിധേയമാകുന്ന വിധത്തിൽ ആ നടപടികൾ പൂർത്തീകരിക്കാനായി. കേരളത്തിൽ ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞ 10 വർഷക്കാലത്തിനിടയിൽ നാം വിതരണം ചെയ്ത് പൂർത്തീകരിക്കപ്പെടുന്നത് 5 ലക്ഷത്തോളം പട്ടയങ്ങളാണ്. ഈ വരുന്ന 24-ാം തീയതി കേരളം പൂർത്തീകരിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത് 5.25 ലക്ഷം ലൈഫിലൂടെ നിർമ്മിച്ച ഭവനങ്ങളാണ്. ലക്ഷം വീട് പദ്ധതിയിൽ ആരംഭിച്ച് ലൈഫ് എന്ന പദ്ധതിയിലൂടെ തുടരുന്ന സമ്പൂർണ്ണമായിട്ടുള്ള ഭവന നിർമ്മാണ പദ്ധതികളടക്കം ലോകത്തിനു മാതൃകയായി ഏറ്റവും ശ്രദ്ധേയമായിട്ടുള്ള നടപടിക്രമങ്ങൾ നടത്തപ്പെട്ട ഒരു നാടാണ് ഈ കേരളം. ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ എവിടെയും ഇല്ലാത്ത വിധത്തിൽ ഭൂപരിഷ്കരണ നിയമം നടപ്പിലാക്കി മണ്ണിൽ ജീവിക്കുന്ന മുഴുവൻ മനുഷ്യനും കൂട്ടിവെക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്ന പരമാവധി ഭൂമി എത്ര എന്ന് കണ്ടെത്തുകയും ബാക്കി വരുന്ന അധികമായ ഭൂമിയെ ഏറ്റെടുത്തുകൊണ്ട് മണ്ണില്ലാത്തവർക്ക് വിതരണം ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഏറ്റവും ശക്തമായിട്ടുള്ള സാമൂഹ്യ നീതിബോധം പ്രകടിപ്പിച്ച ഒരു സ്ഥലവും ഈ കേരളമാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഈ ബോധ്യങ്ങളിൽ അടിയുറച്ചു നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് എല്ലാ വിഭാഗത്തിലും ഒറ്റപ്പെട്ടു പോകുന്ന സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഓരങ്ങളിലേക്ക് മാറ്റി നിർത്തപ്പെടുന്ന ഒരു ജനതയെ സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ മുഖ്യധാരയിലേക്ക് കൊണ്ടുവരിക എന്ന ഏറ്റവും ശ്രമകരമായിട്ടുള്ള പരിശ്രമങ്ങൾക്കാണ് ഈ ഗവൺമെൻറ് നേതൃത്വപരമായ പങ്കുവഹിക്കുന്നത്. ആ പദ്ധതികളാണ് നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിൽ നടപ്പിലാക്കപ്പെടേണ്ടത്. ഇപ്പോൾ നമുക്കെല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്നത് പോലെ കേരളത്തിലുണ്ടാകുന്ന ദുരന്ത മുഹൂർത്തങ്ങൾ പലതും കണ്ണ് നനയിക്കുന്ന അനുഭവങ്ങളാണ്. ഏറ്റവും അവസാനം നടന്ന ചൂരൽമലയിലെ ദുരന്തം ഉൾപ്പെടെ കേന്ദ്ര ഗവൺമെൻറ് അടക്കം നമ്മളെ സഹായിക്കേണ്ട മേഖലകളിൽ നിന്ന് ആ സഹായം ഇല്ലാതാവുകയും ഭരണഘടന ഉറപ്പു നൽകുന്ന ഫെഡറലിസ്റ്റ് തത്വങ്ങൾക്ക് തന്നെ ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്ന വിധത്തിൽ ഭരണകൂടങ്ങൾ ഇടപെടുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന കാലത്ത് ഒരു ദുരന്തത്തിനും കേരളത്തെ വിട്ടുകൊടുക്കാത്ത വിധത്തിൽ സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ പിന്നാമ്പുറങ്ങളിലേക്ക് മാറ്റി നിർത്തപ്പെടുന്ന ജനതയുടെ ശബ്ദവും വെളിച്ചവുമായി ഈ ഗവൺമെൻറ് മാറുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് നമ്മുടെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ലക്ഷ്യം. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഈ വിഷൻ 2031 ഈ പ്രവർത്തനത്തിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നമ്മളിവിടെ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്ന സാമൂഹിക ശാക്തീകരണം എന്ന ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട വിഷയത്തിൽ സമൂഹത്തിനാകെ തുല്യനീതി ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുന്ന വിധത്തിൽ അത് കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്നതിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് വളരെ പ്രമുഖരും പ്രശസ്തരുമായിട്ടുള്ള ഈ രംഗത്ത് പ്രവർത്തിച്ചും ഈ രംഗത്ത് അനുഭവങ്ങളിലൂടെയും ലോകത്തിൻ്റെ വിവിധ മേഖലകളിലെ ഇത്തരം അനുഭവങ്ങൾ കണ്ടും മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുന്ന ഒരു സംഘം ആളുകളെ കൂട്ടിയിരുത്തി നാടിൻ്റെ വികസനം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പാലങ്ങളുടെയും റോഡുകളുടെയും കെട്ടിടങ്ങളുടെയും നിർമ്മാണം മാത്രമല്ല, അത് സമൂഹത്തിന് തുല്യമായിട്ടൊരു നീതിയെ പ്രദാനം ചെയ്യൽ കൂടിയാണ് എന്ന കാഴ്ചപ്പാട് ഏറ്റവും ശക്തമായി അവതരിപ്പിക്കലാണ് ഇതിൻ്റെ ലക്ഷ്യം. ഇവിടെ ഉരുത്തിരിയുന്ന അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ കൂടി കൂട്ടിവെച്ചുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും 2031 കേരളത്തെ ഹൃദയത്തോട് ചേർത്ത് പിടിച്ച് ഇപ്പോൾ തന്നെ നാം നടക്കാൻ ആരംഭിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുകൂടി ഓർമ്മപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് അത്തരം ചർച്ചകളുടെ ഒരു നല്ല വേദിയായി ഇത് മാറട്ടെ എന്ന് സന്തോഷപൂർവ്വം അറിയിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഇവിടെ എത്തിച്ചേർന്ന എല്ലാവരെയും സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാരിന് വേണ്ടി അഭിവാദ്യം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ വാക്കുകൾ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. നമസ്കാരം.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Sri V. Abdurrahman, Honorable Minister for Minority Welfare, to address the gathering.
ഏറ്റവും സ്നേഹം നിറഞ്ഞ സഹോദരന്മാരെ, വിഷൻ 2031 കേരളം പുതിയ കാലത്തേക്ക് സഞ്ചരിക്കുമ്പോൾ കാലത്തിനനുസരിച്ച മാറ്റം നമുക്കുണ്ടാവണം എന്ന ദീർഘവീക്ഷണമാണ് ഇതിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ പങ്കുവെക്കാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്. അതിവേഗത്തിലുള്ള സാമ്പത്തിക വളർച്ച കൈവരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനം എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ എല്ലാ വകുപ്പുകളെയും ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ കൃത്യമായ ഒരു പ്ലാൻ നമുക്കുണ്ടാവണം. ആ പ്ലാനാണ് നമ്മൾ വിഷനായി അംഗീകരിച്ച് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്. ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട റവന്യൂ വകുപ്പ് മന്ത്രി ശ്രീ കെ രാജൻ ഇതുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ സൂചിപ്പിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു. ഇവിടെ വേദിയിൽ നമ്മോടൊപ്പമുള്ള സുപ്രസിദ്ധരായിട്ടുള്ള ആളുകളൊക്കെ തന്നെ ഉണ്ട്. അവരുടെ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ കൂടി നമ്മൾ കേൾക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. ഒരു ഡോക്യുമെൻ്റ് തയ്യാറാക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ ഓരോ ജില്ലകളിൽ നിന്നുള്ള അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ ക്രോഡീകരിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് സംസ്ഥാന തലത്തിൽ പ്രഗത്ഭരായിട്ടുള്ള ആളുകളെ കൂടി ചേർത്ത് നമ്മളുണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഡോക്യുമെൻ്റ് അത് ഭാവി കേരളത്തിന് ഒരു മുതൽക്കൂട്ടാവുമെന്ന കാര്യത്തിൽ സംശയമില്ല. ഇന്ന് നവവികസിത രാജ്യങ്ങളുടെ ജനങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിത നിലവാരത്തിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ മാറുകയാണ്. കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ അഭിമാനപൂർവ്വം നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ കഴിയും. 57 ആദ്യത്തെ ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ കാലം തൊട്ട് തന്നെ കേരളത്തിലെ സാമൂഹിക വ്യവസ്ഥയിൽ വലിയ മാറ്റങ്ങൾ വരുത്തിക്കൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ മുന്നോട്ട് പോയിട്ടുള്ളത്. നവോത്ഥാന മൂല്യങ്ങൾ ഒരിക്കൽ പോലും അതിൽ വിട്ടുവീഴ്ചയില്ലാത്ത നിലപാടാണ് നമ്മൾ സ്വീകരിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിലെ ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങളായാലും ദളിത് വിഭാഗത്തിൽപ്പെടുന്നവരായാലും ഒക്കെ തന്നെ ഈ നാട്ടിലെ സമൂഹത്തോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ ഉയർന്നു നിൽക്കാൻ പ്രാപ്തരായി, തല ഉയർത്തി നിൽക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്നവരായി മാറ്റിയെടുത്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഇതിൽ തന്നെ ഒന്നാം ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ കാലത്ത് 57 ആദ്യമായി വന്നിട്ടുള്ള ഭൂപരിഷ്കരണ നിയമമടക്കമുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളിലൊക്കെ തന്നെ വലിയ മാതൃകയാണ് രാജ്യത്തിന് തന്നെ നമ്മൾ സംഭാവന ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. രാജ്യത്തിൽ ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനത്തിനും കേരളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന ഭൂപരിഷ്കരണ നിയമത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പരിഷ്കാരം ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനത്തും നടപ്പിലാക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടില്ല. ഒരു വസ്തുത കൂടി ഈ ഒരു സെമിനാറിൽ നമ്മൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്നുണ്ട്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് അഭിമാനമുള്ളൊരു മലയാളി തലയുയർത്താൻ അവരെ പ്രേരിപ്പിച്ചത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവരെ ശക്തരാക്കിയത് എന്നത് ഇതിലേറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടൊരു കാര്യം തന്നെയാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ GDP വളർന്നാൽ മാത്രം പോലെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സാമ്പത്തികമായി വളർച്ച മാത്രമല്ല നമ്മുടെ ലക്ഷ്യം, സാമൂഹികമായി തന്നെ വളർച്ച നമ്മൾ ലക്ഷ്യം വെക്കുന്നത്. ഈ രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ വളർച്ച തന്നെ നമ്മൾ നോക്കിയാൽ സമ്പത്തിൻ്റെ കേന്ദ്രീകരണം ഒരു ഭാഗത്ത് നടക്കുന്നത് നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയും. അപകടകരമായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് പോകുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ കേരളം എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ബദലാവുന്നത്, വ്യത്യസ്തമാവുന്നത് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പരിശോധിക്കപ്പെടേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. പാർശ്വവൽക്കരിക്കപ്പെട്ട ജനങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ വികസന നേട്ടങ്ങൾ പ്രതിഫലിക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നതാണ് രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ പൊതുവായിട്ടുള്ളൊരവസ്ഥ. പക്ഷേ കേരളത്തിൽ അങ്ങനെയല്ല. കേരളത്തിൽ തുല്യമായി തന്നെ വികസനങ്ങൾ എല്ലാ ഭാഗങ്ങളിലും, വ്യത്യസ്തമായുള്ള ജനവിഭാഗങ്ങളാകട്ടെ, ഏത് ഉയർന്നവരാകട്ടെ ചെറിയവരാകട്ടെ, അവർക്ക് ഒരേപോലെ എത്തിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയുന്നുണ്ട്. കേരളത്തിൽ അതിന് വ്യത്യസ്തമായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു രീതിയാണ് നമ്മൾ ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഇപ്പോൾ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിൻ്റെ സവർത്തീകരണം, വിപുലമായിട്ടുള്ള ക്ഷേമ പദ്ധതികൾ, അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ ഭൂമിയുടെ വികേന്ദ്രീകരണം അടക്കമുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ തന്നെ സാമൂഹിക ശാക്തീകരണ രംഗത്ത് നമ്മൾ പടുത്തുയർത്തിയ അടിത്തറ എന്നുള്ളത് തന്നെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാര്യമായി നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയും. ചരിത്രപരമായിട്ടുള്ള കാരണങ്ങൾ സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ പിന്നാമ്പുറങ്ങളിലേക്ക് തള്ളിപ്പെടുന്നവരെ അവരുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൻ്റെ വികസന നേട്ടങ്ങളിൽ കൊണ്ടുവരിക, അത് പ്രതിഫലിക്കുക കൂടി ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഇതിൽ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടൊരു കാര്യം. ഈ സാമൂഹികമായ പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥ കാരണം സാമ്പത്തികമായുള്ള പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥയും അനുഭവിക്കുന്നവരുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ സാമ്പത്തിക ശാക്തീകരണം, അതിനുള്ള പിന്തുണ ശക്തിപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് അവരുടെ സാമൂഹിക പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥ മറികടക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഇതിനുള്ള വിപുലമായുള്ള പദ്ധതികൾ നടപ്പിലാക്കുന്ന സംസ്ഥാനമാണ് കേരളം എന്നുകൂടി ഈ അവസരത്തിൽ ഓർമ്മിച്ചു പോവുകയാണ്. ഇത്തരം പദ്ധതികളും പ്രവർത്തനമൊക്കെ തന്നെ കാലോചിതമായി അതിനെ അനുസൃതമായി മാറ്റിക്കൊണ്ട് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുക, അതിന് കഴിയുന്നവരാണ് ശക്തരായുള്ള ഭരണകൂടം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഭരണകർത്താക്കൾ എന്നുള്ളത് കൂടി നമ്മൾ കാണും. സംസ്ഥാന സുസ്ഥിരമായൊരു വികസനം സാധ്യമാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ സമാധാനപരമായൊരു ജീവനന്തരീക്ഷം നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനം ഉണ്ടാകണം. അപ്പോൾ ഈ 10 വർഷത്തെ ഒരു കണക്ക് നമ്മുടെ അടുത്ത് പരിശോധിക്കുമ്പോൾ ഒരു വർഗീയ കലാപം പോലും റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യപ്പെടാത്തൊരു സംസ്ഥാനമായി കേരളം മാറിയിട്ടുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളത് സാമൂഹിക മേഖലയിലുണ്ടായിട്ട് വലിയ മാറ്റം തന്നെയാണ്. ഇവിടെ നമ്മൾ താരതമ്യം ചെയ്യപ്പെടേണ്ട അന്യ സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിലെ നിലവിലുള്ള സ്ഥിതിയാണ്. ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗങ്ങൾക്ക് രാജ്യത്ത് ഇന്ന് അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന ഒരു അനിശ്ചിതാവസ്ഥ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ നിലനിൽക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങൾ മാത്രമല്ല, അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ ദളിത് വിഭാഗങ്ങൾ തള്ളപ്പെടുന്ന നിരവധി കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമ്മൾ കാണുകയാണ്. കലാപങ്ങളിൽ എല്ലാം നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടതായി മാറുന്ന ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങളും ദളിതരുമൊക്കെ തന്നെ നമ്മൾക്ക് എന്നും ചോദ്യചിഹ്നമായിട്ട് മാറുകയാണ്. മതനിരപേക്ഷതയിൽ വിട്ടുവീഴ്ചയില്ലാത്തൊരു നിലപാട് കേരളം സ്വീകരിക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ് ശക്തമായിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ വിഭാഗം ജനങ്ങളെയും ഒന്നിച്ചു നിർത്താൻ ഒരു മതനിരപേക്ഷ ജനാധിപത്യ സമൂഹം പടുത്തുയർത്താൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയുന്നത്. ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിനാകെ മാതൃകയായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സംസ്ഥാനമായി നമ്മൾ മാറി എന്നുള്ളതും അതുകൊണ്ടാണ്. ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങൾക്ക് സ്വതന്ത്രമായി അവർക്ക് ആത്മവിശ്വാസത്തോടു കൂടി സഞ്ചരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഇടം എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ നോക്കൂ, ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങളുടെ കാര്യമെടുക്കുക. അവരുടെ വിശ്വാസത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായ അവരുടെ സ്ത്രീവസ്ത്രങ്ങളും ധരിച്ച് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മറ്റു സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിൽ സഞ്ചരിക്കാൻ പറ്റാത്ത ഒരവസ്ഥയിലേക്ക് ഇന്ത്യ മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. പല വിദ്യാലയങ്ങളിലും നമ്മുടെ മറ്റുള്ള സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിൽ ഒന്നിച്ച് പഠിക്കേണ്ട വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾ അവരൊന്നിച്ച് ഒരു കിണറ്റിൽ നിന്ന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പാത്രത്തിൽ നിന്ന് വെള്ളമെടുത്ത് കുടിക്കാൻ പോലുമുള്ള അവകാശം നിഷേധിക്കപ്പെട്ട സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ഇന്നും നിലനിൽക്കുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ സാമൂഹിക വ്യവസ്ഥയിൽ രാജ്യം മുന്നോട്ട് പോയിട്ടില്ല. പക്ഷേ സാമ്പത്തികമായി മുന്നോട്ട് പോയി എന്ന് അവകാശപ്പെടുന്നതും സമ്പത്തിൻ്റെ കേന്ദ്രീകരണം ഒരു ഭാഗത്ത് നടക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് നമ്മൾ കാണേണ്ടത്. ഇവിടെ സോഷ്യൽ സെക്യൂരിറ്റി എന്നുള്ളത് ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുക നമ്മുടെ കടമയാണ്. അപ്പം അതിലേക്ക് ഓരോ മലയാളിയും ലോകത്തിനു മുമ്പിൽ ഇന്ന് അഭിമാനത്തോടെ നിൽക്കുന്നത് മറ്റൊന്നും കൊണ്ടല്ല, സാമൂഹിക വ്യവസ്ഥയിൽ അതിൽ വ്യത്യസ്തങ്ങളായ എല്ലാ മേഖലകളും നമ്മൾ പോകുന്നു. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം എന്നുള്ളത്. വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ മേഖല നമ്മൾ ഏറ്റെടുത്തത് എന്താ? ഏതെങ്കിലും പ്രത്യേക ജാതിക്കോ മതത്തിനോ അതീതമായിട്ടുള്ള നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സംവിധാനം. നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സംവിധാനം എല്ലാവർക്കും വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം എന്ന് 57 ആദ്യത്തെ ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ കാലത്ത് തന്നെ കുറിക്കപ്പെട്ടൊരു സംവിധാനമാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലാണ് ഇന്ന് പഞ്ചായത്തുകളിൽ പോലും ധാരാളം വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളുള്ള പൊതുവിദ്യാലയങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒന്നിച്ചിരിക്കാനുള്ള ഇടമായി, പരസ്പരം ഇഷ്ടപ്പെടാനും ബഹുമാനിക്കാനും സ്നേഹിക്കാനുമുള്ള ചെറിയ പ്രായത്തിൽ തന്നെ അവരെ പര്യാപ്തമാക്കുന്ന രീതിയിലേക്കുള്ള വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ കേന്ദ്രങ്ങൾ ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിൽ ആരംഭിച്ച ആ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൻ്റെ ദീർഘവീക്ഷണത്തോടു കൂടിയിട്ടുള്ള കാഴ്ചപ്പാടിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് അതെല്ലാം ഇന്നും തുടരുന്നു. ഇപ്പോൾ ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട റവന്യൂ മിനിസ്റ്റർ ഇവിടെ സൂചിപ്പിച്ച ഭവന പദ്ധതിയും അടക്കമുള്ള നിരവധി കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ തന്നെ ഇതിൽ ഉൾപ്പെട്ടതാണ്. ഇവിടെ നമ്മൾ ചെയ്ത മറ്റൊരു കാര്യമുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പോൾ പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥ നേരിടുന്ന ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗങ്ങൾ, ഇപ്പോൾ ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ ന്യൂനപക്ഷമാകട്ടെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മുസ്ലിം ന്യൂനപക്ഷമാരൊക്കെ, ഇവരെക്കുറിച്ച് പഠിക്കാൻ നമ്മൾ കമ്മീഷനുകൾ വെച്ചു. പാലോളി കമ്മീഷനായാലും ജസ്റ്റിസ് JB കോശി കമ്മീഷൻ അടക്കമുള്ള കമ്മീഷനുകൾ, ആ കമ്മീഷനുകളുടെ റിപ്പോർട്ടുകൾ നമ്മൾ എടുത്ത് മേശയിൽ പൂട്ടുകയല്ലേ ചെയ്ത്, നടപ്പിലാക്കുകയാണ് ചെയ്തത്. ഇപ്പോൾ JB കോശി കമ്മീഷൻ റിപ്പോർട്ട് നമുക്ക് ലഭ്യമായി. 284 ശുപാർശകളിൽ ഏകദേശം 50 എണ്ണം ഒഴികെ ബാക്കിയെല്ലാം നമുക്ക് നടപ്പിലാക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞു. ബാക്കിയുള്ളൊരു 50-ൽ പരം ശുപാർശകളിൽ ഇനി വേണ്ടത് നിയമപരമായി കേന്ദ്ര ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൽ തന്നെ നിയമത്തിൽ മാറ്റം വരേണ്ട ചില ശുപാർശകളാണുള്ളത്. അതുകൂടി നടപ്പിലാക്കുമ്പോൾ JB കമ്മീഷൻ റിപ്പോർട്ട് പൂർണ്ണമായും നടപ്പിലാക്കാൻ കഴിയും. പാലോളി കമ്മീഷൻ റിപ്പോർട്ടായാലും നല്ല രീതിയിൽ തന്നെ ഇന്നത് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ പിന്നോക്ക ജനവിഭാഗങ്ങളുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം ലക്ഷ്യം വെച്ചുള്ള നിരവധി പദ്ധതികൾ, സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകളാകട്ടെ, റിസർച്ച് സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകളാകട്ടെ, അങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യസ്തങ്ങളായുള്ള സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകൾ നൽകിക്കൊണ്ട് പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥയിൽ നിന്നും വിദ്യാഭ്യാസപരമായി പിന്നോക്കം നിൽക്കുന്ന ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗങ്ങളെ മുന്നോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുവരാനുള്ള വലിയ ശ്രമം നമ്മൾ നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത് വിജയം കണ്ടു എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ അവസാനമായി 2 പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകൾ നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പോൾ ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ചീഫ് മിനിസ്റ്റേഴ്സ് മൈനോറിറ്റി റിസർച്ച് സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടതാണ്. 7 ലക്ഷം രൂപയാണ് ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് ഒരു വർഷം നമ്മൾ സ്കോളർഷിപ്പായി നൽകുന്നത്. ഇപ്പോൾ മാർഗദീപം 1,24,000 ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക് മാർഗദീപം സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് 8ാം ക്ലാസ് വരെയുള്ള വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക് കൊടുക്കുകയാണ്. ഇവിടെ കേന്ദ്ര ഗവൺമെൻറ് ചെയ്തെന്താ? സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകൾ നിർത്തലാക്കുന്നൊരവസ്ഥയുണ്ടായി. ഇപ്പോൾ ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗങ്ങൾക്കുള്ള ഫണ്ടിൽ വലിയ തോതിലുള്ള വെട്ടിക്കുറവുണ്ടായി. വലിയ രീതിയിലാണ് വെട്ടിക്കുറച്ചുള്ളത്. 300 ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ പണം ബഡ്ജറ്റുകളിൽ നിന്നും ഇല്ലാതായത് ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗങ്ങൾക്കുള്ള ഫണ്ടുകളാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ദളിത് വിഭാഗങ്ങളിൽപ്പെടുന്ന അവരുടെ ഉന്നതികളുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്കായി വ്യത്യസ്തങ്ങളായുള്ള നിരവധി പദ്ധതികൾ നമ്മൾ അവതരിപ്പിച്ചു. ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിൽ ഇത്രയും നല്ല രീതിയിൽ നടക്കുന്ന ഒരു വകുപ്പുകൾ നമ്മൾ പരിശോധിച്ചാൽ, ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാന ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗം അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ പട്ടികജാതി പട്ടികവർഗ വികസന വകുപ്പിൻ്റെ പ്രവർത്തനം നിങ്ങൾ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ തന്നെ മറ്റു സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളുടെ പ്രവർത്തനവുമായി താരതമ്യം ചെയ്താൽ യാതൊരു ആക്ഷേപങ്ങൾക്കും ഇടയില്ലാത്ത വിധത്തിൽ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് മുന്നോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോകാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് അത് വിലയിരുത്തപ്പെടേണ്ടതാണ്. ഇവിടെ നടക്കുന്ന പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ചർച്ചകളിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ മുന്നോട്ട് വെക്കുന്ന നിരവധി ശുപാർശകൾ നമുക്ക് ഇനിയും കേൾക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും. അതുകൂടി ഉൾക്കൊള്ളാൻ നമ്മൾ തയ്യാറായി നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. കാരണം നമ്മളിൽ കഴിയുന്ന, ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾക്ക് നമ്മൾ വിട്ടുപോയില്ല ഏതെങ്കിലും കാര്യമുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ നടപ്പിലാക്കിയതെന്നും വിദഗ്ധമായുള്ള അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ വരികയാണ്. തീർച്ചയായും അത് സ്വീകരിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് 31ലേക്കുള്ള യാത്ര നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ സർക്കാർ ആരംഭിച്ചുള്ള ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗത്തിലും ദളിത് വിഭാഗങ്ങളായാലും പൊതുസമൂഹമായും എല്ലാം ഒന്നേപോലെ കണ്ടുകൊണ്ട് സാമ്പത്തിക സാമൂഹികപരമായിട്ടുള്ള പിന്നോക്കാവസ്ഥയെ പരിഹരിക്കുന്നതിന് പ്രത്യേകം ന്യൂനപക്ഷ പിന്നോക്ക വിഭാഗങ്ങളെ മുന്നോട്ട് നയിക്കാനുള്ള നിരവധി പദ്ധതികളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ കൂടി അതിലുള്ള ഏതെങ്കിലും കുറവുകൾ സൂചിപ്പിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മുന്നോട്ടുള്ള യാത്രയിൽ ഇനിയും ഇത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഇനിയും ഇതിൽ കൊണ്ടുവരേണ്ടതുണ്ട്, ഈ രീതിയിൽ നമ്മൾ ചിന്തിക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട് എന്നതൊക്കെ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് പറയാണെങ്കിൽ കഴിയും. ഇപ്പോൾ തന്നെ ദളിത് വിഭാഗത്തിൽപ്പെടുന്ന നമ്മുടെ സഹോദരന്മാർക്ക്, നമ്മുടെ കുട്ടികൾക്ക് പഠിക്കാനുള്ള വിദേശ സ്കോളർഷിപ്പുകൾ ധാരാളം നമ്മൾ കഴിയുന്നു. ഇപ്രാവശ്യം 57ഓളം കുട്ടികളെ വിദേശത്ത് അയച്ച് പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഏറ്റവും സന്തോഷമാണ് കേരളത്തിലെ ഒരവസ്ഥ ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മറ്റേതെങ്കിലും സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിൽ അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് പോലും നൽകാൻ ഏതെങ്കിലും സംസ്ഥാനം തയ്യാറായിട്ടുണ്ടോ? ഒരിക്കലുമില്ല. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായുള്ള നിരവധി പദ്ധതികളുണ്ട്. കാരണം പാനലിസ്റ്റുകളൊക്കെ ഇരിക്കുകയാണ്, ഞാനത് കൂടുതൽ ചർച്ച ചെയ്ത് നിങ്ങളുടെ സമയം അപഹരിക്കാൻ പാടില്ല എന്നുകൊണ്ടാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ 5000 കോടി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത് കേന്ദ്ര വിഹിതം അത് വെറും 300 കോടിയിലേക്ക് എത്തുന്ന ഒരവസ്ഥയാണ് നമുക്കുള്ളത്. അപ്പോൾ ഏകദേശം രാജ്യം ഭരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇവിടുത്തെ പിന്നോക്ക വിഭാഗങ്ങളെയും ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങളെയും ഒക്കെ തന്നെ അവർ കാണുന്നതെന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഫിഗറാണ്. ആ ഒരു ബഡ്ജറ്റ് വിഹിതം തന്നെ പരിശോധിച്ചാൽ നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയും. അപ്പോൾ ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള നിരവധി കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടേണ്ടത് ഞാൻ നിങ്ങളുടെ സമയം അപഹരിക്കാതിരിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി ഞാൻ കൂടുതൽ കാര്യങ്ങളിലേക്കൊന്നും കിടക്കുന്നില്ല. ഏതായാലും ഏറ്റവും ആരോഗ്യകരമായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു ചർച്ച നടക്കുകയും നമ്മുടെ ഡോക്യുമെൻറ്റോട് ചേർന്നുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ നിങ്ങളുടെ വിദഗ്ധ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ അതോടെ പാനലിസ്റ്റ് പറയുന്ന നല്ല നല്ല അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ട് സ്വീകരിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ സർക്കാർ മുന്നോട്ട് വെച്ചുള്ള വിഷൻ എന്നുള്ളത് കേരളം പുതിയ കാലത്തിലേക്ക് പോകുമ്പോൾ നവകേരളത്തിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ പുതിയ കാലത്തിലേക്ക് യാത്ര ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ പുതിയ നാഴികകൾ സൃഷ്ടിക്കാൻ ഈ വിഷൻ ഡോക്യുമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ വ്യത്യസ്തങ്ങളായുള്ള സെമിനാറുകൾ നമ്മൾ സഹായിക്കും. അതിന് നമ്മുടെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു വിഭാഗമാണ് ന്യൂനപക്ഷ പിന്നോക്ക വിഭാഗങ്ങൾ. അവരുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട ചർച്ചകൾ ഏറ്റവും നല്ല രീതിയിൽ പൂർത്തീകരിക്കട്ടെ എന്ന് ആശംസിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഇവിടെ എത്തിയിട്ടുള്ള പാനലിസ്റ്റുകളും ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട എല്ലാവർക്കും സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ പേരിലുള്ള അഭിവാദ്യങ്ങൾ ആശംസകളും നേർന്നുകൊണ്ട് നിൽക്കുന്നു. നന്ദി രേഖപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം, ജയ് ഹിന്ദ്.
Thank you, sir. Respected Honorable Ministers, Sri K. Rajan, Sri V. Abdurrahman, and respected panelists, Justice K. Chandru, Professor Gopal Guru, Dr. Meera Velayudan, Professor Virginis Kaka, Advocate Irfan Engineer, Professor Gidanchan Joy Sahu, Dr. A. Kaushigan, Secretary SC, ST, and OBC Department, Directors of the Social Empowerment Department, Srimati Josephine, delegates and friends. Vision 2031, this international seminar, we are creating a platform to take stock of our developmental journey and to collectively imagine our future. This conference brings together scholars, administrators, intellectuals, activists, and researchers, strengthening Kerala's tradition of participatory dialogue and democratic consultations. Over decades, the synergy of mass movements and progressive public policy has produced globally recognized human development outcomes. Kerala leads in India in literacy, life expectancy, maternal and child health, school enrollment, and SDG index. This seminar is actually a continuum of the 33 seminars conducted by various departments of Government of Kerala. In social empowerment also, we had one full-day seminar in Wayanad district. Various schematic group discussions were conducted, opinions and suggestions were collected from experts, researchers, administrators, people's representatives, and also from public. Those suggestions which could be immediately implemented were incorporated into the state budget in 26-27. Kerala's policy is guided by the principle that all individuals, irrespective of their caste, tribe, gender, religion, or economic status, should have equitability in the benefits of development. This commitment of social justice, secularism, and inclusion informs the state's approach to economic and social policy with the objectives of reducing discrimination and deprivation through institutional and programs based on interventions. Land policy has historically played a central role in Kerala's approach to social equity. The state's land reform significantly reduced the entrenched inequalities, and expanding economic security. Building on its achievements in human development, Kerala seeks to address persistent structural inequalities that affected scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward communities, minorities, and other vulnerable communities. Government of Kerala intervenes through schemes which aim at their educational development, social upliftment, economic empowerment, and protection of civil rights. These interventions focus on access to quality education, expanding stable employment, promotion of entrepreneurship, comprehensive health care, improving access to land, housing, and social protection, while strengthening opportunities for participation in civic and public life. For educational development of students hailing from SC, ST, OBC, and minority communities, the government provides several scholarships and other financial assistances, along with efforts to develop an intensive institutional framework to support the educational advancement. The assistances provided by the government for education and empowerment ranges from pre-primary education to higher education, and also education in foreign countries. Kerala has been successful in reducing the dropout rate of scheduled caste students in school education from 0.26 in 2016-17 to 0.06 in 2023-24. Likewise, dropout rate of ST students reduced from 2.2 in 2016-17 to 0.6 during the same period in Kerala. After the Union government discontinued the Maulana Azad National Fellowship Scholarship for minority research students, the Kerala government introduced a new scholarship scheme to support these scholars from the minority communities. Improving access to vulnerable communities, especially for SC/ST communities, to land is given utmost importance by the state. From 2016 to 2026, a total of 34,163 SC families were given land. A total of 8,573.5 acres of land has been allotted to 8,990 ST families during this period. Under Life Mission, the construction of 1,25,360 houses for scheduled caste beneficiaries and 45,976 houses for scheduled type beneficiaries has been completed till October 2025. Similar schemes to ensure decent housing are implemented by the government for the people of other backward communities and minority communities. However, despite the fact that such initiatives improved their socio-economic conditions in comparison with other states of India, they still have faced numerous challenges in the areas of development and lag behind the general population in many indicators of development. Hence, the committed and continuous efforts of the state will continue in these areas of the socio-economic development. Kerala has already addressed majority of the first generation issues such as lack of education, land, housing, and allied amenities, facilities for their settlements and employment, health and nutrition issues, addressing atrocities, etc. There are effective programs and schemes under the government to address these issues, and they are implemented through various departments of the government. Now the state is focusing more on addressing the second generation issues such as access to quality education, both at the school level and at higher education level. Access to healthcare facilities, high quality health facilities, entry to global and emerging job market, and promotion of entrepreneurship, access to agricultural land, addressing vulnerabilities and discriminating practices including gender-based violence, inclusion in knowledge economy, converting the education institutions as centers of excellence, etc. Also, particular attention is given to strengthen targeted development programs and emerging non-traditional job opportunities that are modern and of high income. The government of Kerala aims to deepen social inclusion and sustain progress towards a more just and inclusive society. Social transformation in Kerala will be supported by strengthening institutional capacity so that development outcomes will ensure equity, empowerment, and dignity. With these words, we'll start the panel discussion. I would like to call upon the first panelist, Justice K. Chandru, former Judge, Madras High Court, to deliver his speech. Sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. This session, we are discussing the Vision 2031 with reference to social empowerment. In fact, it was the Kerala government which circulated the preamble to the Constitution, which is considered to be one of the basic structure of the Constitution, to the school students. I don't think any state has started an exercise of making the students to understand the values of the Constitution. If you look at the preamble, it talks about justice, not mere political, but also social and economic justice. Therefore, there can never be a complete justice once you get political freedom. It is in that sense we try to tell the ordinary students that the justice has got many, many more dimensions. Now, I remember in 1927, to be precise, on 25th December in 1927, Dr. Ambedkar went to the Savadar tank movement. It is a very simple movement. There is a public tank. We want to take water. Now, while entering the Savadar tank, the agitation went for 6-7 days, and Dr. Ambedkar said that water can be there everywhere. It doesn't mean in this tank we should take, but the point is that it is our right to take water from a public tank, and therefore we are exercising our social right in entering the temple. After the 8th day, Ambedkar did something which is unthinkable today. He took a copy of a Manusmriti, or what is called Manu Dharma, so-called Dharma, and he burnt a copy of a Manu Dharma. In fact, we'll be celebrating the centenary of burning of the Manusmriti, and at that time, in fact, the entire media was aghast that somebody could do this, that burning a copy of Manusmriti. Nobody has ever done that. And he said that when you talk about Dharma, the Dharma means Dharma to everybody. You can't have a Dharma for a section and then say it is a Dharma. And it is a symbolic act under which we are burning a copy of a Manusmriti. And today, I could imagine that this thought process that try to seclude a section of the society forever in some name, whether it's a pollution or untouchable or whatever name that you give, and you try to exclude them. And then the point is that when you talk about inclusion, it is a real inclusion of the excluded. It is in that sense, when we talk about social empowerment, we should think of broader connotation of empowerment. Now, when the Constitution of India was enacted, Ambedkar was also the chairman of the drafting committee. There are some people who still contest what is a great contribution. In fact, the greatest contribution that you could think of our Indian Constitution is the Charter of Right under the Fundamental Rights chapter in Part 3, Article 14, equal protection of all laws. It did not stop with that. It went to further Article 15, which said that the state shall not discriminate on grounds of caste, religion, sex, descent, or any one of them. It is for the first time I could think that the Indian state promised to the people that there could never be any discrimination based on caste or a religion. It is in that sense, in fact, few years back, there was a Hindi film by name Article 15. Somebody asked the director, why do you say Article 15? There are 395 articles. Why only 15? He said it's the heart of the Constitution. If at all, for centuries together, more than 20 centuries, people have been excluded from public places. People have been excluded from learning process. People have been excluded every kind of political process. And the state comes and says, whether it is a public place or a public service, there can never be exclusion based on caste and religion. It is the greatest right that you could think of. If you add Article 17, that untouchability is abolished in all forms. Now these four, which is a unique piece in any constitution in the world, I do not think even the American Constitution does not talk about abolition of slavery. When they got the unilateral declaration of independence in 1773, the first line said, all men are perceived to be equal. They did not think of women. They did not think of the blacks. It is 1820, slavery was abolished. It is 1960, women got voting rights in America. So this sentence that all men are equal still continues today. Unlike that kind of a situation, we had a different connotation of equality. It is not just mere equality or arithmetic equality. It is something beyond that. The Article 15 and 16 clearly mentions about an affirmative action in every sphere of life, whether it is public access to institution or public service. It talks about affirmative action. Now there is a confusion. What is this affirmative action? Is a reservation, is a concession, or a benefit, or a right? This question keeps on haunting all of us. In fact, most of the judgment in this country on reservation was dealt by judges who doesn't know anything about reservation. It was the Avarna judges who said this is a concession and not a right. The fundamental misunderstanding that it is not a right, only a concession, it's only a time process that will solve this problem, is always created a problem. And you will find in the last 75 years, the judgment after judgment, it is something like a condescending attitude, a patriarchal attitude. I am giving you this, have this. It is not a question of somebody handing out some concession. It is beyond that. It's a question of an empowerment. Recently, you know, our Chief Justice, newly taken over, he dealt with a case of a UGC regulation on equity, 2026 regulation, and he granted stay. What is the reason for stay? What is the reason for staying within one day's time? Did you ever think that these regulations were a product of a time? In fact, 2012, UGC had a regulation, equity regulation. Equity for whom? Equity for everybody. It doesn't specify anybody. It is only when Rohit Vemula committed suicide, it's only when Payal committed suicide in Bombay, a tribal doctor, both the mothers went to the Supreme Court and said, you may have higher education, you may have an entry, but the education is not very happy situation. We have been discriminated at every point of time. The life becomes so miserable. We need to have some protection within the higher education campus. Now, this issue from 2020 to 2025 dealt by 4 different benches. And the last bench was headed by Suryakant, who is now the Chief Justice. In 2025, he told the UGC, why you are delaying publishing this regulation? Why didn't you publish it? This was an order passed in August 2025, and UGC published it. And the direction came from the Supreme Court. Now once the regulation comes, there is an agitation. As usual, every time when there is a proactive situation, we have a rightist group, the RSS, the ABVP, the BJP. They said, how can you have equity only for scheduled castes? How can you have equity only for scheduled tribe? What about us? Then the question comes, when you talk about empowerment, who are you trying to empower? It is unempowered or to be empowered. Empowering doesn't mean everybody, the whole, all and sundry. And then in granting interim stay of the new regulation, the Chief Justice blurted out his own personal ideas. It's not a judgment. It is not a worth even reporting. He said, what did the Brahmins do all these days? Now why are you punishing these people? Who are you against? Now the question is, every time when you talk about social empowerment, you always bring the question, who are we? Where are the Savarnas? Where are the upper caste of the Savarnas? Then you talk about as if you have been victimized. This is the fundamental understanding, the faulty understanding that we had. In fact, in this vision statement, I went through it several times, and I am pained to see the first sentence. It says that all individuals, irrespective of caste, tribe, gender, religion, economic status, should equally have the benefits of development. We are not saying development should be everybody, that's all right. The question is, when there is a problem, you address the problem. The problem today is a scheduled caste boy, a scheduled tribe boy, or a girl never feel happy studying in a higher education institution. And then the UGC is compelled to bring. Now what the Chief Justice says, what about 2012? Your 2012 regulation remained as a paper resolution. When Rohit Vemula wrote a suicide note, he said, I am dying because I have no other option. If you drive these people who are supposed to have been educated in this higher education institution and die because there is nobody to care them, you have a regulation. You have a care to protect them. And therefore the protection from whom? The protection from people who are trying to haunt them, who are trying to taunt them, who are trying to drive out this. Now you say equality. What kind of equality you are talking about? That is why I am saying there is a clear perception. There is a perception difference between America and India. In fact, I can tell you, recently there was a judgment, Sukanya Shanta's case. Anybody can read that. That's the first judgment I could think of. Supreme Court made some sense. That was a case where the prisoners were treated on basis of caste. It is not just the segregation, it's also the work. The menial work are given only to the scheduled caste prisoners. Not so menial work are given to the others. It's all done by official rules, not by any individual officers. Official rules made them to do this. And Supreme Court was aghast that how could you have a statutory regulation trying to say scheduled caste will do the cleaning work and non-scheduled caste will do some office work. Where do you get this? It is in that context Supreme Court made two important statements. The first statement they made in that judgment, in fact, that's the first judgment I could think of, that where Supreme Court quoted Dr. Ambedkar in 8 places. For the first time, a Supreme Court quoting Ambedkar in their own judgment as a justification as to how the underprivileged in this country are being treated. In that context, Supreme Court said Article 15 perhaps is the first time that it guarantees a amount of certain equal protection of our laws and state from being prevented from showing discrimination. In fact, they used the word that this hitherto justice, what they did not use is a Manudharma. Manudharma has been buried and social justice has been restored. Unless you understand that this difference, that this constitutional support is something like a proactive, not some concession, not some privilege. Beyond that, it's a statutory right or a constitutional right that is vested on the scheduled caste people. And now, if that is taken into account, Supreme Court also said that the court cannot remain mute. The judges must take an active stand and to remove the hitherto, the vestiges, the hitherto remains of the caste prejudice which has been carried over the centuries. If you are going to remove the caste prejudice, you are going to remove the vestiges of the caste prejudice, you will have to take a proactive stand. The moment you take a proactive stand, you say reverse discrimination. I understand why people are now borrowing American phraseology. American constitution is different from our constitution. Till 1960, America was toying with an idea. There the difference is not caste, difference was color, black and white. And therefore they were saying we should have an affirmative action so that racism is removed. Now the affirmative action was considered to be wrong because there is a section of the American population which said we can have separate but equal doctrine. You are equal but you are separate. Everything you will get but you remain there. Our Supreme Court said we will never accept this document. separate but equality is never accepted in India. If you are equal, you are equal. But unequals can never be treated as equals. If unequals are going to be treated as equals, it's not equality. Therefore, there is a fundamental difference, and that is why in Suganya Santa's case, the judges must play an active role to remove the vestiges of caste prejudice. They must dismantle this kind of apartheid that goes on in this country. When that is a legal position, and we have a Chief Justice, within 2 minutes he grants stay order of the UGC regulation. Now what do you do? What happens to the scheduled caste people? What happened to the scheduled tribe people? Now what will happen to them? They will continue to suffer. And then till when? Until their lordships decide this issue. Now there is one thing. Now to say that why you are prejudiced against the upper caste people, why you are prejudiced against the Brahmins who are nowhere responsible. We are not interested in this theoretical exercise. On the other hand, if you are talking about social empowerment, you must clearly say that it is the empowerment of people who have not been empowered so far. It's an empowerment of people who have been socially put to behind, who have been educationally put behind. We want to bring them. And it is in that sense, Constitution has been amended, not once, 3 times it has been amended. There has been a reservation for scheduled caste people in higher education institutions, whether private or public. Now if you try to send them to the institution and try to create an hostile information, that means the very right you are trying to pluck away. It is in that sense, I would now to ask our honorable ministers also, that this first sentence gives a small deviation, that the policy is all individuals, irrespective of caste. I do not think that is the concept of equality. I do not consider that is a social empowerment. The social empowerment is the people who have been denied today, give them the empowerment. And for that, you may have a proactive stand. If you take a proactive stand, you do not say it is a reverse discrimination. This is an American phraseology. In fact, in California University, the university made some rules where blacks will be admitted. They will be given some preference if there is a first generation black, if there is nobody in the family who are educated, some kind of a support action. Now the American Supreme Court, in that Bakes case, says it's a reverse discrimination. We do not accept that stand at all, because it is not just 14. 14 is also circumscribed by Article 15 and 16, which is an independent right, not an exception of 14. And the basic concept, equals can be treated equally, unequals cannot be treated equally, and that's the only way of understanding. And I'm sure Kerala will also go forward in bringing a more effective method by which the underprivileged will not be treated as underprivileged, and they will be treated as an empowered society in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll definitely relook into our policy, concept note and make corrections according to your opinion, sir. Now, I request Professor Gopal Guru, former professor, Center for Political Studies, the JNU, and former editor, Economic and Political Weekly, to address the audience.
Without wasting time, let me thank the Kerala State Planning Board for inviting me and my other distinguished panelists today to share some of our thoughts about the Vision Document 2031. Since it is a vision document, the document has to be forward-looking and looking where? Looking to achieve human flourishing for human being, irrespective of caste, gender, and that disclaimer is always there. Justice Chandru is right in saying that in order to empower people, one has to use caste as a necessary criteria, and therefore compensatory discrimination has come in the Indian Constitution because certain people were discriminated exclusively on the basis of caste. And therefore, if you want to classify people for reservation purposes, you require caste. Similarly, if you want to move ahead for achieving human flourishing, that will on priority include nutrition. My dear friend Veena is there, she spoke in nutrition. Nutrition is so absolutely important. Health, education, and a person has a right to appear in the public without the sense of shame. Now this is going beyond the capacity of the state. I mean, state can't really regulate, it can, but it can say that look here, you can't really insult people. You can actually abuse them publicly on the basis of caste, gender, and minorities. So that, of course, is the responsibility of the civil society to see that no one is assaulted publicly in the public domain. But there are two prepositions I would like to put to the consideration of the current government. That vision can emerge only through division. You must have a very accurate, comprehensive understanding what are the divisions that are there in the society. And I think the document might have covered this. The vision to the future is to minimize the gaps in the society. That's the division. I think that would that is taken care of in the vision document. But there are two prepositions I'm going to submit to you, the consideration of the audience here in the hall. First, to become socially empowered is to become equal with others in terms of both material, health, job, land, business. I think business is also the part of this conclave. So this is, to achieve material good, you require to be equal with others. Second proposition, to become equal is to become equal with morally. That is to say that a woman in her whole full being is able to walk in the street without any anxiety. And I must congratulate Mr. Minister that I saw some women yesterday at 10:30 waiting for the bus. So I think, this is my outsider's observation. So that's my observation. A SC, and we call them Dalit for different reasons. A Dalit person enjoys moral good because he or she can walk in different spheres of life without taking his tag with him. To put it simply, a person is not a Dalit professor, he is not a Dalit intellectual, he is not a Dalit judge, he is not a Dalit doctor. He is a doctor. You do not use prefix for other caste people, only for. I do not know to what extent can the government issue the regulation to see that no one would really, this depends on the attitude of the civil society. I don't think there is any chance for the state to intervene, but civil society should take. So I think the two propositions, one is material good, the other one is moral good. Let's talk about the first, preposition in particular reference to Kerala, and my very dear friend Meera is there, and I don't want to risk anything about details in Kerala because she's the real magnet of data and dynamics of this SC situation in this part of the country. The first preposition in my judgment is about positive conception of empowerment. It is positive because it can, through the state intervention, demonstrates its effects on the social groups such as SCs and STs who faced almost total exclusion from the material and positional good. And Kerala is no exception. We know the struggle by Ayankali and Sri Narayana Guru. We know that, and then work done by the Labour government and other governments in this part of the country. In India, including Kerala, the society was organized around rigid principles of hierarchy. Spaces were actually marked. And I have details, but we don't want to go into that historical details. It is needless to mention that the denial of material good and moral good was backed by traditionally conservative rather than modern principle of justice. And Justice Chandru made a mention to that. Hence, the exclusion was arbitrary without any rational justification. This is a very technical term, and the judges can really explain this. There is no, why are you not allowing the list to walk into the street? What is the justification? What is the principle? Do you have any principle? It has just come from your mind of the Manu. That's it. So there is no justification. So there the exclusion was arbitrary. There are exclusions which are rational. For example, if there is a person, if there is a boat, ferry going, and it can accommodate only 10 people, 11 person cannot be accommodated, excluded. And why? Because if he is included, boat might sink. But this exclusion is beyond our imagination, very arbitrary. But it was backed by karma theory. You are to be excluded because you were born untouchables. And you cannot be excluded in the modern time. So the karma theory, which was codified in caste and gender categories, has been the decisive factor that prompted the socially dominant group to produce over a longer period of time an arbitrary forms of exclusion. Do they really exist in this country, in this state? The government will take due care of this concern. In the modern Kerala, karma theory, I'm sure, and this is, I think as far as I can see, it's very important. In the modern Kerala, under the leadership of the left LDF, karma theory, I'm sure, will fall short in its conceptual capacity and confidence to provide any robust public reason that can defend the practice of disempowerment. This is a confusing thing, but the simple thing is that yesterday in the inaugural session, the Chief Secretary of Kerala government made a very interesting speech. What he said was, we actually run by the help of public reason. Now, what this public reason will keep out karma theory. It will work only on the basis of rational and reason which is given in the Indian Constitution. And people of Kerala actually come to the board, discuss arguments. So he said, and I think I agree because my experience of Kerala has been absolutely outstanding. People in Kerala actually take decisions through arguments. So it is argumentative Kerala. That's what he said. And I think I agree with him. The state government will take care of that, that the karma theory is out. and only the modern rational reason is in place. And now I would make another point just for the consideration. I'm quoting Dr. Ambedkar. Government, he said, take care of that. That policy requires the direction of principle. If you don't anchor policy into principle, policy can go haywire. It can go into misdirection. It can be deficient, it can be inadequate, it can be arbitrary, it can be prejudiced. In order to avoid all these infirmities that are likely to be there in the policy, you must always have principles. So what is the principle that the state government of Kerala is expected to do? And it has been done in the past. The Kerala states, like some of the states adopted land reform policy, which was based on the distributional principle that empowered the tenants to become the peasant. The tenants were given the control, the ownership of land. Am I right, Meera? Yeah. Sorry, I should ask here. So they got the ownership. From tenant to peasant, that is the status they achieved. They were empowered, so to say. And there's no problem about that. What was the principle that was adopted by the government? The principle was adopted that it is the inheritance principle, that the tenants were cultivating, they had the control, not ownership, they had the control of the land. Therefore, the principle is that they should be given the ownership right of the tenant. Am I misreading this? I think this is the overall definition. And this is the rationale behind making a tenant a peasant, which is a fine rationale. I mean, there's no problem. But in case of agricultural laborers, who are by and large SCs in Kerala context, they were controlling, they were cultivating and not controlling. They were not controlling, but they were cultivating the land. And therefore, the principle was that the principle of the government was the principle of commitment. In one case, distribution principle, the inheritance principle. Second case is a commitment principle. There is no inheritance. And agricultural laborers were given 3 cents of land for building houses, no ownership of land. The tiny piece of land which they were allotted for constructing the houses, and I think the Professor Ramachandran yesterday made this point that the houses are so beautiful, but it is also, I was told recently, it is also true that they also borrowed some money from others, so they are not able to pay the construction cost. So I think empowerment would be complete when you actually do not have any burden of debt on the head. So, so that principle is, which is laudable principle. You have a commitment to responsibility that you must have mentioned in your policy document and party's document, that we will see to it that the SCs get some 3 cents of land for constructing houses. And but the thing is that you should also go beyond and find out whether they are able to retain the house without any sense of anxiety. So they should be able to instantiate their empowerment, which is happening in a process of cumulative exercise. I mean, you are actually accumulating your exercise. It is not running away from you. You are not disempowered. You are increasingly, growingly becoming empowered. And the monetary job of the state is to see that they don't become disempowered, that they are really harassed by the bank managers for the recovery of the loan. So the job the vision document is a growing document. You have to keep close eye on what is happening to the need of empowerment. This is the moral good. Let me now, do we have 2 minutes or 3 minutes? 3 minutes I have, okay. And this goes very close to what Marx was saying. Now, once you have a labor power, a labor has a power, and Marx says, can that really automatically grant him or her empowerment? If that is the case, why workers go into alienation against empowerment? And I have no time, we can debate it some other time, but that's the problem. Now, this power has to be recognized by the general public, and that is how it becomes empowered. Let me give a very simple example. A leather worker invests his power into creating different, beautiful, aesthetically very sound artifacts, articles, leather bags and others, jackets. He invests that power, physical and mental power, because also he invests skill. Therefore, it is physical and mental both, creative power and physical power. But do you know this fellow who is manufacturing a leather ball in Meerut in UP, and I'm sure it must be happening. In Tamil Nadu it happens. How many of us know how much this fellow is paid for a cricket ball? No one knows. And he, in the process, actually loses his hands, because there are 40 kinds of chemicals used for refining the leather, from raw hide to superfine leather. 40 kinds of chemicals without any proper, protection, gloves and all that. Now, this fellow doesn't feel empowered because he's invisible. Who is visible? The fellow hits success. He is so much empowered. He also invests skills and energy, I'm not complaining, but the counterfactual situation you just don't understand. All those people who celebrate cricket, I have no problem, but what about that fellow? He goes into disempowerment and in Marxist term alienation. How do you actually empower him? To see that he can also be equally celebrated. He also receives equal recognition along with the cricketer. I'm just saying one, but he can be, and this is just the illustration, he can be any other worker, a woman. So I think this is a difficult job for the state, but state can actually think about it creatively, at least have a continuous dialogue with the civil society through deliberations, as you have done 31 seminars you have conducted, which is a wonderful exercise, I would say. But continue to hold these dialogues, isn't it? And that will make vision as a very progressive document. It will grow because empowerment is a work in progress. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Our next panelist is Dr. Meera Velayudhan. She's a former president, Indian Association for Women's Studies. Madam, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Respected Minister and members of the Planning Board, Jamila, we've been interacting on this session quite a lot for the last month or two, and all the departmental heads. And I'm actually very fortunate to be in this panel of speakers, because these are all persons who have sort of inspired me over the years with their work, with their whole personhood and their contributions. And we've also, in many platforms, we've come together. So we are sort of fellow travelers with our own areas of work. So I'm really thankful to the planning board for creating this panel itself. And I would like to, my theme is actually social empowerment, an intersectional approach to equality, social justice, inclusive growth as public policy. You know, this is what the vision document also mentioned, but it's also what the intersection is, what also Justice Chandru also mentioned, that there are intersections in these, equality, social justice, and inclusive growth as a public policy. So we have to also look into deep at how they intersect to sort of define what is social empowerment. And the vision document also mentioned that it talks about the SDGs, how the, India, the Kerala, in fact, is sort of, its achievements, in fact, in many of the SDGs are actually goals with targets. And many of the targets have already been reached, like infant mortality and maternal mortality. These sort of figures are already achieved by the Kerala state in this development path itself. But also, it says that how Kerala's development path is historically rooted in public actions and state-supported welfare measures for the common good of all as public policy. And this is what this common good is what I would like to talk about. And this is what also I think Justice Chandru has mentioned. Now, when you talk about the common good, we also can see it in the context of the constitutional commons. And what is the constitutional commons? I would like to mention that. It's sort of a framework, an ethical sort of framework, which sort of, there are three pillars to it. One is that whole thing of the three pillars. One is the preamble, which you have mentioned as the justice. And then there is the fundamental rights. And thirdly, there is the directive principles of state policy. And so it actually, what one means by this is that while you have these principles of the constitutional, various principles, they also intersect. For instance, the Dalits, for instance, would talk about land rights. They would talk about discrimination. Yes. They'll talk about discrimination, while, say, tribals would be like to protect their land and also about the forests. And at the same time, so what you talk about the constitutional commons is also not just what is common to all, but also what are the specific kind of discrimination or special assertions that are taking place, and how we need to continue to see that within the framework of the Constitution. So there are things that are specific, and there are specific kind of common, while there is a common good is there, there are also specific marginalities that take place. Okay.
Yeah, I'll hold it for you.
Okay. And so one looks at, say, for instance, the document mentions that we are sort of moving towards a knowledge economy, and education, especially higher education and skill development, as stepping stones to becoming that part of that knowledge economy. While literacy has been seen as an indicator of educational progress, this alone doesn't make you look, unless you look at the schooling, the total years of schooling, enrollment, and dropout rates of retention by age, gender, and levels of education, gross enrollment ratio, and these are sort of important. So you have these specific indicators which sort of give an overall picture. At the same time, quality, quantity, and equity are three important pillars of education. So you need to look at the macro factors as well as the social environment that shape these particular indicators. And they may be about age, they may be caste, class, community, age, disability, it could be transgenders, it could be, so these sort of define the marginalities. And so what I've done is that I'm just briefly going to take 3 papers, recent studies which I have mentioned how these intersect. And the first one is about, Kerala is historically sort of known for excellent human development indicators, as well as, educational attainments, and also it has a matrilineal kind of history, which is supposed to be a sort of positive aspect. At the same time, there's also a paradox of in this empowerment is that there are also deeply grained patriarchal norms which coexist and practices. So you have these positive indicators, but there's also patriarchal norms and indicate the practices which also coexist. And my studies, I'll just mention them. So therefore, you have Kerala, as you mentioned, as we see, is that very fast changing family dynamics, and even female labor market is also changing very fast. But these also create newer sort of challenges to women who are trying to both work and be as earners, as well as who take care of the home and who are care workers. So in the developing Kerala, this one of the studies which I have taken up is where spouses, middle and low income household, they both need to work, and where many educated women struggle to find full-time employment. Thereby, it sort of impacted the family well-being. A study found that if a spouse supports the woman who's working, then the pressure to quit the job is much less, and there is a strong belief among the women who have even dropped out that both need to work for to break this traditional sort of norm, and for contribution of both are very necessary. So this is supported by a study that if the woman is working in say in the informal sector, you need state support in those sectors, whether it's as a in the shops or in malls or anywhere. You need special, not only support from society, but also support from the state. Protections are needed for those sections. And therefore, these are sort of challenges which women who are trying to balance as workers and earners sort of thing. In sort of a study also found that the need for how women come and go into the labor market. That's a large section of women in Kerala. They come in and go out, and they drop out for certain reasons. They may be like it's for child care, and they may be also for because they got married. There may be risks of pregnancy or childbirth or family responsibilities of taking care of others, and these are all sort of in addition for the or maybe some go to do higher skilled work also. The study shows that how um, these are sort of gendered. So these are gendered areas which need specific state intervention. For instance, those who go to work in the malls or anything, they need special childcare facilities, transport facilities. So these sort of areas are where the state can intervene and can look to in terms of policies, what we say is a common good of all. And despite interruptions, most women aspire to be employed, and many return to participate in paid work, sometimes after multiple breaks. They sort of come in and go out of work. So, so the aspirations of wanting to work is contingent on these sort of supportive services that are there. And also there's a paradox. One of the things which I'll quickly go through is domestic violence. Now we find that according to the data, the study shows that how there is a large number of how domestic violence, very high levels in the all India scale also. In Kerala, the domestic violence is a very high scale. Of course, there are people who cited the spouses having alcoholism and things like that. But at the same time, studies have shown how that this violence has actually increased more with the age of the married woman. I mean, the more longer that they are married, the older they are, there is more violence. And these are very interesting kind of thing. At the same time, one wants to mention that the women and child, not only women and child department, other departments have also brought out a whole range of schemes. You know, there is the, the one-stop centers for violence, Mahila Mandirams, Mitra helplines, women protection officers under the Domestic Violence Act. There are benefits, even the health department also, and even the homeopathy department, Kurmbashri also has Snehita. These are sort of available, but the one looks at the report, one says that this information has not got to the sections, all the sections who want to avail of these benefits. It has not, so the information needs to go out to them in much more effective manner, and that is what the study has says. And also the training and capacity building which the government has been conducting, particularly of first line kind of respondents, police and various sections who are involved in at various levels of addressing violence, how their work should be also appraised. There should be an appraisal mechanism. And also the other thing which also is very famous in Kerala is that when violence takes place, there are, in a bus or in the public, there are bystanders who watch, who say that if we intervene, we'll be in more problems, But what we need to say is that these bystanders need support. And if the state shows that there is support for those who say, give evidence, then there will be more people, because that evidence shows that you are a citizen and you are a responsible citizen, which is what the Kerala model is all about, that you need to be responsible, effective citizenship, that you sort of enforce that citizenship. So therefore you need to come forward, So I think these are sort of, aspects which the state can intervene positively so that you feel that you need to come out. And lastly, I would like to say, and it is a very positive thing of the whole exercise that we are conducting. And I have been coming to all the seminars since the mid-90s, the Kerala, discussing, and also have been part of have been co-chair to the planning, the 5-year plan, both the 13th plan. I was part of the gender and development. I was a co-chair, as well as in the SC/ST development. I was the co-chair of that also. And so we've had very extensive sort of discussion also. This whole, I think that's a positive aspect, is that you're publicly debating this. There's a continuous debate at different levels that is being conducted, and as we are doing now. So I think this is very important for us to sort of carry forward this continuous, and because this is what will make this communication at different level and dialogues, which is continuous, which is part of the effort of the government. And I think this is what will give strength to all the challenges that we face, because particularly the federal, now our development is also very much challenged with the federal kind of the center state and the federal, the kind of barriers that are being created, just creating much more difficulties. Yet there are, that we continue to be able to develop despite that. And that is, I think, the positive thing of today's discussion. So thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am, for the nice speech. Now, next speaker is Professor Virginius Kaka. He's visiting professor, Institute of Human Development, New Delhi. Sir, please.
At the outset, I would like to thank the Kerala State Planning Board for the invitation. Well, I'm not really familiar much with the scheduled tribe communities in Kerala, including South India, as I am a little familiar with the Central India and Northeast India. So I would like to look at the situations in Kerala in the context of the larger canvas and see as to whether there is anything that we can learn from what is happening in other parts of India. I would like to look at empowerment from two senses, and that's, I think, largely used in social science literature, particularly in sociology. We have an idea of empowerment which comes from the concept of power itself. And Max Weber is one of them, who says the power is the ability to get things done in spite of resistance, opposition from others. Now, that is one kind of power that we are talking about. The other kind of power that has been again used in sociology is power is really looked at a kind of resource, a kind of money. And the greater you mobilize the resources, the greater is the power. Now, if you really look at Weberian sense, it inheres in the what you call the legal institutional structure, state institutions, where you find that there is a power vested, but then someone exercises a power but is against the others, or even in spite of opposition of others. The other is more in terms of capacity building, let's say through education, through health, through skills, and so on and so forth. And these two concepts of empowerment, to me, at least in the context of tribals in India, seems to be an important, that in terms of rights and in terms of capacity building. And these are not really antithetical. These are not really. They are complementary in a certain sense. And I think the reason as to why capacity building of the scheduled tribes in terms of, let's say, education attainment or health quality and so on and so forth gets compromised is largely because you find that the rights and entitlements that they had over the land, the forests and resources is also compromised. I think that's so you find that, yes, there is the empowerment, but alongside the empowerment, there is also a disempowerment process that has continuously been going on. And this is not something which began today. It has a colonial history. And I think in order to understand the tribal situations, one has to go little back to the colonial history. And you find that since they were living in land, they had forests and resources, and you extend a generalized law into the tribal territory, particularly when Bengal was captured by the East India Company, and they extended the rules to all the tribals in and around Chotanagpur, asking them exactly in terms of an alien law and alien institutions. And therefore, you find that alien law and institutions actually taking away the power, the traditional power, authority that they had over their own community, the way in which they were managing their land and resources. And therefore, you find that that is the reason as to why series of revolts and rebellions, and eventually British has to think that, well, in order to maintain the order, one has to really contain. And therefore, you find that all through, if you really look at history, they were trying to say as to how best to give them, allow them to continue in the sense they were, and not to apply the generalized law. And therefore, as early as 1822, you find that the regulated tract, ruling by regulations and not extending the regulations, that became an important part of addressing the tribal questions in India with the British. So regulated tract, in the sense, any law by state will not be applicable unless you give best to, unless the executive thinks that it is in the interest of the tribal community. So this is how you find regulated and non-regulated, agency tract, scheduled districts act, excluded and partial excluded areas, and eventually excluded and partial excluded areas got translated into 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution and the 5th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So it has a history of it. Now, basically, this is a sort of protective mechanism, because I think when people are vulnerable, you need to protect them in order to see that from that protection, they are able to empower themselves. Otherwise, if they are not given that protections, they will be further more and more vulnerable. Now, that's the reason. So you have in the constitutions a 6th schedule that is in the northeast, and you have 5th schedule, which is almost 10 states of mainland India. But southern India, whether you talk of Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, you do not have any sort of constitutional mechanisms. So you find that South India is almost outside of any sort of constitutional arrangement because that kind of an arrangement did not exist during the colonial period. So that, I think, is an interesting issue. Now, if you really look at that, then you find that the Northeast seems to have done very well in terms of social and development indicators. You look at in terms of literacy, in terms of health status, they are extremely done well. The South India comes next because Kerala is in fact one of the best in terms of addressing the social development indicators and therefore social empowerment of the scheduled tribe communities. But then is a problem. But if you really look at the mainland India, the heart of India, you find that despite the 6 scheduled provisions, the social development indicators are the worst in the country. So how do you really explain this? In other words, this basically becomes that empowerment and disempowerment. In the Northeast, you have protected arrangement, you have autonomous district councils, you have states with a special constitutional status, and therefore you can protect your rights over land, or forests and resources. Because in the Northeast, even a law passed by, it's the autonomous council, passed by the parliament or state legislature is not going to applicable, and therefore it's not adversely impacting it. And therefore you find that they are able to, and they themselves develop their own, they are the agents of development, not really the bureaucracy, but people themselves, through the bureaucratic state, are able to develop themselves. That is a sort of empowerment that you find. So you find very high level of literacy and high level of people who are going to higher educations, and therefore also the higher education institutions. So that's, I think. Now, mainland India is why? Because you find that although there is this provision protected arrangement in terms of legal laws, whether you go to Chotanagpur or elsewhere, almost all states in mainland India, if you schedule, they have protective laws, and it hasn't really worked. And it hasn't really worked because you have a generalized law. Land Acquisition Act, Minerals Act, Indian Forest Act, and various other acts. And you find that when there's a protective arrangement and the generalized act, it doesn't really work. Generalized acts are more important than addressing the protective arrangement. As a result of which you find it every time you find people getting displaced, removed, and so on and so forth. I think Kerala, you have these provisions is not there, but what you find that there is a development indicator is very good. So the point that I'm trying to make to where there are protective arrangements in terms of certain kinds of legislation, and then you find that there's certain kinds of generalized laws, and if these are put into that, there is always a preeminence of generalized laws over the protective laws, as a result of which you find the disempowerment. So I think social empowerment cannot really take place when one is constantly under threat of losing control over land, resources, forests, either because of land displacement, because of the minerals, because of encroachment of what's called the Indian Forest Act and wildlife sanctuaries and so on and so forth. So that is not really going to work. I think that's exactly, I think we really need to keep when we're really thinking about this, what's called the development of the scheduled tribes or empowering the scheduled tribes. We have to see as to how the kind of institutional arrangements that are in their favor, is there a possibility of ensuring and protecting them from the larger generalized laws, which are actually in a way encroaching that kind of autonomy that they really have. So that I think is most important. And in Kerala, I think you find that although you development indicators, the role of the government, the state has been very important, but I think there is a need to think in terms of as to how the laws which are meant to protect them, how does it really work? And I think that is something I think needs to be considered. And that is where you then find that both in terms of, because when you have protected and resources are needed, people are extremely vulnerable, and that I think is going to, I just happened to be in Wayanad last week, and I found that, yes, the literacy is high, people are going to the colleges, etc. But I think quality of what is called educations of the tribals in the colleges, the kind of institutional structure, etc., really need to be thought about it. If really you want to come to the same level as where is the good model of the Northeast, Kerala can do it. But I think unless these things are addressed, I think it is a little difficult to do that. So the point I'm making is that the empowerment through the legal measures and empowerment through the capacity building, it goes side by side. If people, if you are going to compromise with the legal empowerment which is already there, and you don't really address it, and allow that to be eroded, allow to be impacted, then your social empowerment is not really going to be successful. I think in order to have social development successful, the empowering of that is only possible when you find that you're able to see that you are able to protect the rights over the land, the forest, and other resources. And if you don't really do that, then I think even social impact in terms of education and health is not really going to. I think that is one context I feel the Kerala State Planning Board needs to be seriously thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful words. Now, our next speaker is Advocate Irfan Engineer, Director, Center for Study of Society and Secularism. Sir, please.
Honorable Minister and dignitaries on dais. I also, like previous speakers, thank Kerala State Planning Board for this exercise and for including social empowerment as one of the topics on which the Vision 2031 document will focus and think about. Coming straight to the topic, India to an outsider looks like a country of federations of communities. So having deep identities, Muslim community, Christian community, Hindu community, and likewise other communities. But these communities are not homogeneous. From outside, the elite of the community try to project these communities as homogeneous communities, united. They have their symbols on which they mobilize their community and stand firmly, but they are internally divided. They are internally divided through hierarchies, caste hierarchies, which exist not only in Hindu community, but you find caste-like structures in Muslim community as well. You find caste-like structures in Christian community as well. And even in Jain community, actually. I was surprised to know that even Jains have scheduled castes amongst them. Sikhs have scheduled castes amongst them, so on and so forth. And there is gender hierarchy within this community. Now this renders the vision of our constitution almost non-est. It nullifies, because our constitutional vision is not that people people are communities having rights, but citizens having rights and equal rights. And here is where efforts have to be made by state as well as civil society movement. I am standing in Kerala, which has seen two big movements, which appear to be halted somewhat. One is Narayan Guru's movement against caste structures and casteism with inclusive approach. And I think that contributed greatly to development of Kerala or the present social indicators that we have. You know, Kerala stands out in all educational indicators or all indicators of social inclusion, etc. So the movement of Narayan Guru. And the other movement that I recollect is the Islam movement, which was during colonial period amongst Islam, which fought against the upper caste, landlord, elite Muslims who had complete control over the community. They there was a movement so that Muslims, all Muslims have dignity, and internal social reform movement. These movements, as far as I know, whatever little I know about Kerala, have sort of halted, or they are going on at very slow pace, invisible, or sometimes even in reverse direction. We know about Narayan Guru, the SNDP, and its position that they are taking now. This is all being negated by the right-wing Hindu nationalist movement, which is bringing back federation. I mean, India was going slowly towards inclusive, marginalizing identities, or rendering them as insignificant as possible. Slowly, we were all going towards that. Now, the Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar set a goal for all of us, and that was annihilation of caste. Some of our policies of Government of India and some state policies, actually when they base their policies based on caste, the ideal of, or the vision of caste annihilation is lost somewhere. We see more and more caste movements for their share in power, social power, political power, Jats wanting their status as backward class, so on and so forth. Gujars in Rajasthan, they are fighting for their status as OBCs, so on and so forth. And I don't know how far these movements are even in Kerala. So somewhere that vision of annihilation of caste is lost. I'm purposely caveating my presentation on basis of this. And so we can have three stages. One, caste-based, rigid identities, communal identities which oppress women, which oppress Dalits, which oppress OBCs and other sections of the society. The second stage could be, and I think in the early 60s and 70s, we were trying to march towards that, is to make identity irrelevant for public governance and public policy. So public policy takes into account, as Professor Gopal Guru very rightly said, and Justice Chandru also very rightly said, that in order to fight in order to reach equality, we have to fight. There should be unequal people should be treated unequally. So taking that into account, but slowly making identity, otherwise making identities irrelevant. Therefore, in Constitution Article 15 and 16, we did not say Shudra caste or policies for Shudra caste. We said socially and educationally backward classes, which of course the policymakers realize that the social and economic backwardness is on the basis of caste. But the goal is not to harden caste identity, but to marginalize it. Now, that is what, and the third stage that we must reach is Ambedkar's vision of annihilation of caste, so that the whole identity of caste would go away. And I would say communal identities also is completely marginalized or withers away. I was to present a paper in a seminar which was about futures, future of agriculture, future of environment, future of scheduled castes, Dalits, minorities. And there I had said, for the minorities, I was to present from the perspective of minorities, and I said the future of minorities should be the ideal future. Whether we are going towards it or not is another issue. But the future of minorities should be withering away of their identity of minorities, because minority identities are also constructed. Muslim identity is also constructed. Muslim community is very, very diverse internally. And just to very quickly quote one incident that my father, Dr. Asghar Ali, engineer who was an Islamic scholar, he encountered here. He was writing a book on Kerala Muslims, and he was introduced to a widow in a village, in Kerala village, by a translator, interpreter. And the interpreter said, he's an Islamic scholar, he wants to interview you. Would you care to reply to his questions? This widow looked at my father from top to bottom and said, is he a Muslim? And the interpreter said, of course, there's no doubt he's a renowned Islamic scholar. There's no doubt. She quietly asked, then why is he not speaking Malayalam? For that lady, the Muslim world that she had seen was Malayalam speaking Muslims. So we have to make these. Now, how do we do this? One, we heard from the minister, and rightly so, all the indicators, expenditure, how much money has been spent, scholarships given, how many people have been educated, how many people received the benefits from minorities, from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, etc., etc. But my question is, will that be sufficient? The more you spend on scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, more there is a reaction from right wing, as Justice Chandru pointed out in the case of the UGC policies that was there, that there is a right wing reaction to it, and upper caste very popularly respond to it. What do? This withering away of minority identity or communal identities or annihilation of caste is not going to take place only because a section of it, a tiny section of it was educated, received scholarship, had benefits, etc., or get jobs. Those who get jobs through reservations, many studies have pointed out that they then care less about the community as a whole, but care more for their family or their immediate kins, etc. Yes, in spite of that we need. I'm not opposing. I'm saying that is not sufficient. So what do we do? If we have to have a futuristic Kerala looking into future, then we need a legal structure, legal reforms that empowers all sections of the society and that appear to all sections of the society reasonable. The first thing that I would suggest, which I'm borrowing this from Sachar Committee report, the first thing that I would suggest is a continuous compilation of diversity index. Unless you compile diversity index, studies on diversity index, housing societies, how diverse they are, which industry, how diverse they are, bank loans, how diversely they were distributed, so on and so forth. In every section, if we have diversity index, it will sort of snap a picture of the society. If you then base your affirmative action on that diversity index, then there's less of a reason for people to react. Those who have been not included in affirmative action, for that section to react that we are excluded, they lose their ground. All right, so there has to be measures of inclusion, but they also have to appear to be reasonable and justified. The second measure, again drawing from Sachar Committee, is Equal Opportunity Commission. We know there is discrimination. There is discrimination of various sections of the society, not just minorities. There is discrimination of Dalits, OBCs, women, minorities, etc., etc. physically challenged people. Also, I mean, there are many categories that I can't think of right now, or I cannot quote right now. There are various sections that are discriminated, maybe also on the basis of language. So Equal Opportunity Commission looks into in which industry, which section of the group is discriminated. If that is done on continuous, of course, diversity index will help, but Equal Opportunity Commission, if they find that there is systematic structural exclusion of any socio-religious category or caste category or gender category in any industry, in any section of the society or in any establishment, be it housing society, be it any, then Equal Opportunity Commission will investigate, and not only investigate, it will take measures to formulate code of conduct, which will be binding on all sections of the society. So if I am discriminated, I find it very difficult to approach a court of law. It takes long years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I don't have resources to approach. Individuals can't approach. Organizations find very difficult. You have to, the burden of proving that I am discriminated is on me. And I'm discriminated in such a clever manner that I can never prove that I am discriminated. When Equal Opportunity Commission intervenes, collects data, finds structural discrimination, then they can take steps against it. The third, my time is running out, so the third measure that I would suggest that can be undertaken as legal reforms is anti-lynching law. Now, you may say there's no lynching has not taken place in Kerala. Our minister said there have not been communal rights. There have been communal rights, very few. Kerala has good records on that front. There may not be anti-lynching, there may not be much lynching going on in Kerala, but as I said, it is a futuristic architecture. Kerala is looking into future and should look into future. There is, I do see a threat of communal politics slowly stepping into Kerala. I don't know when it will take off, but if we have the architecture to tackle it, legal architecture to tackle it now, then we'll be in a position to tackle it. Otherwise, we'll be twiddling our thumbs how to, that's what happened in Haryana. Suddenly, people in Haryana would tell, oh, there's no communal problem here, before 2014. Oh, there's no communal problem here, there can never be communal problem here. Haryanvi identity is, there's caste problem but not communal problem, and Haryanvi identity is very, very important for all of us, and so it will never take place. 2014, and you see the lynchings there, the communalization there, and they are all twiddling their thumbs now what to do. So since we have a government like LDF, which can put this thing into architecture. In education, the fourth, again my time is running out, so I'm very quick. In education sector, constitutional morality and principles should be taught in all, with all seriousness. It should also give moral teachings, moral and ethical values. I'm sure it must be given, but of all religions, so that if somebody attacks one religion, it's not, not that religion is not known to the children. The last point that I'll make on what we should be doing, there's a community policing model, which developed in, there have been experiments in US, in UK, and close in India, in Bhiwandi, where one community policing model was adopted. What was that model? That model is that instead of police sitting in the police station and waiting for crime reports to be, somebody to come and give complaints about crime reports, and then the police have the power to either investigate or not to investigate, to write down FIR or not write down FIR, all that. That's normal policing. Community policing required in Bhiwandi, which was developed by one police officer there in Bhiwandi, and so long as he was there, it ensured that no riots took place even after he left. Even after he left, till date, riots have not taken place in Bhiwandi. What did a community policing model do? The task of the police officer was not to sit in the police station with all that power and tamjham and paraphernalia of power. He was required to go to areas and conduct some, every area should be covered on every day. Monday this area, Tuesday some other area, Wednesday third ward, so on and so forth. And in all these areas, they had to collect 50 Hindus and 50 Muslims. But which Hindus and Muslims? Ordinary working class, hawkers, parlour workers, etc. Ordinary workers, 50, and just conduct a meeting, hear their complaints, and improve and implement whatever was they were required. I can't go into detail, my time is up, but this community, I mean, more can be studied about this community policing model, and I mean, if steps are taken, it will be much better here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Professor Gidanjoy Sahu. He's a professor, Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies, School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai. Sir.
It is a great pleasure to be back in Kerala, and I would say it's a double pleasure because I am sharing the dais with my two professors, Professor Gopal Guru and Professor Varghese Kaka. So thank you, the organizer, for inviting me and giving this opportunity. Keeping in mind the time constraint, I would like to focus on social empowerment of forest-dwelling communities, because I'm sure this audience is quite familiar about land reforms in Kerala, which began in 1963, and subsequently many amendments were made. But there is a difference between Land Reforms Act as well as Land Reforms Act and Forest Rights Act. Now, I'll take 1 minute to explain why there was a need for Forest Rights Act, which was enacted in 2006. Because when land reforms took place, it was a kind of policy across the country, whether it is Kerala, Bihar, West Bengal, or many other states. The idea, the philosophy behind was how to redistribute the land from the landlords to the landless people. But that was a distribution of land. Whereas the Forest Rights Act 2006, which was enacted, and that act was enacted because both during the colonial as well as in the post-colonial period, the forest-dwelling communities across the country, which constitute 150 million people, and 90 million people are tribals, and 60 million people are other traditional forest dwellers, living in and around 173,000 villages in the country are surrounded by forests. Now, these 173,000 villages were historically, both during colonial and in the post-colonial period, their land rights were never recognized. And the colonial legislation, because sometimes legislation can empower people, but also there are legislations which can disempower people, and one such act was your Indian Forest Act of 1927, which was largely based on the principle of exclusion, extraction, and concentration of power. This led to marginalization of millions of tribals during colonial period, and that also continued in the post-colonial period. One expected the modern state will restore the rights. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Rather, exclusion continued in the post-independence period. And it was only in 2006, after concerted efforts, people's movement, including the what we call in political science, the political juncture theory, which allowed a certain group of political parties to come together. That was in 2004 when the coalition politics came into picture, where certain political parties, especially the left, political parties, demanded that there should be restoration of rights. So what happened between 2005 to 2006? We need to, understand that context, because there were several groups who were not in favor of Forest Rights Act, because they were worried that if you give land to tribals, then the tigers will disappear, forest will be destroyed, minor forest produce will be overexploited. Fortunately, the concerted groups, people's movement as well as left groups who were in power and also part of the Joint Parliamentary Committee emphasized that the recognition of rights must be as part of the uniform, what we call the common minimum program, and that became the law in 2006. Now, if you look at where do we stand actually, and this is the 20th year of Forest Rights Act. It was enacted in 2006. We are now in 2026. Now, if you look at the last 20 years, I'm going to quickly talk about where do we stand. From my own analysis, from the various government data set, I see we have very, very sort of unfortunate scenario, and I could, categorize them in the following way. One is there are unforgivable failures, and there are unimaginable achievements. Now, what are these unforgivable failures? Because the agencies which are supposed to implement the Forest Rights Act, and in fact it was one of the commendable job when the Government of India decided to make the tribal department as the nodal agency, not the Minister of Environment and Forests as the nodal agency to implement Forest Rights Act. But in the last 20 years, you see, despite having a very progressive legislation in place, despite having a decentralized governing structure, making Gram Sabha as the agency to scrutinize and verify the claims of different types, individual forest rights, community forest rights, development rights, across the country, only 20% of the potential claims have been recognized after 20 years. So there are 1,73,000 lakhs villages are supposed to get the right. As of now, you see, we have only achieved 20% of the total potential areas. Now, there are several factors, and one of the main factors why this act has not been so effective after 20 years across the country, because if you look at the public policy literature, there are certain factors which are very crucial in the post-enactment of the law. While movements, political parties support the law, during the enactment of the law, very often we find they don't take interest after the law was enacted, and the same thing is true when it comes to the Forest Rights Act. Political parties didn't take much interest in the post-enactment phase. That's why we see across the country, across the political party, whether it is Maharashtra, Odisha, Jharkhand, whichever state you talk about, the Forest Rights Act has not been effectively implemented. Now, there are four crucial factors why I label this as unforgivable failures, because the wildlife groups and NGOs continue to frame forest rights law as a land grabbing or land distribution act, which is not the case. It is not land distribution act. It is an act to recognize the pre-existing rights that they were exercising before the colonial period began. And these pre-existing rights include all those rights: fishing rights, grazing rights, NTF rights, except the hunting rights. However, this has been labeled as a kind of right to grab the land, which is not true. Second, also we don't see the effort of the local agencies, because the district collector office and the SDLC level, SDLC and DLC level also, you see very weak mechanism across the country, and that's why most of these claims are pending today. In fact, last 5 years, no claim has been sort of processed seriously across the country, and the number remains more or less same when it comes to IFR, CFR, or many other types of rights. So this is very disappointing scenario. Even though the Forest Rights Act is a very progressive legislation, not much progress has been done. But what are the lessons one can learn from other parts of the country? Which are those states or districts where one can learn from those districts, and what are the also lessons one can learn from Kerala? Now, here I will talk about three scenarios from three states, three districts. One is Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra, which is one of the leading districts in the country when it comes to Forest Rights Act implementation, because this is the district where you have around 60% of the district is covered with forests. Tribal population is equally very high, and in this district, most of these villages have got their IFR and CFR rights, And more importantly, these are the also villages where you have a convergence plan supported by the district planning committee. And Maharashtra government came up with this plan that each recognized CFR village will get 1,78,000 rupees. So that is how the Gadchiroli district is one of the leading districts in the country, whether it is NTAP rights, because many states, bamboo rights, tendu leaf rights are still regularized, still nationalized, so the community members are not able to exercise that right. So Gadchiroli is one such example. The other state and other district is Kalahandi district of Odisha. Again, in Kalahandi district of Odisha, where you have the Gram Sabha Federation concept has evolved, and this Gram Sabha Federation is a federation which consists of hundreds of villages, and these villages are collectively exercising their rights. They are trying to exercise that right given under the Forest Rights Act, especially when it comes to collective claim process, collective harvesting of forest produce, as well as the collective management of forest. So there are several villages in this part of Odisha where you have collective community rights, which is again a very interesting example. Now the third example, which is the example from the state of Kerala, is the Wayanad district of Kerala. And this is very important for many of us, because when the Forest Rights Act was enacted, the concept was not about only tenurial right, it was also about social and development rights. Section 3.2 of the Forest Rights Act talks about development rights of the villages. And under Section 3.2, the Gram Sabhas can propose 13 different types of projects. These projects includes your education center, health center, Anganwadi center, Rasan shop, approach road. And as you can see from various government database, even the Ministry of Tribal Affairs at some point informed the Parliament that 75% of tribal villages in the country don't have basic amenities, and these basic amenities include your housing facilities, school, road, because the Forest Conservation Act of 1980 didn't allow many of these proposals to get cleared. Because when it comes to mining projects, when it comes to heavy industries, highway, railway projects, generally you have various stakeholders who lobby for that and get it cleared. In fact, the forest clearance procedure, if you look at closely, the clearance rate is almost 99%. But when it comes to a minor sort of project like a school or irrigation project or a transmission line in a village, always they try to show there is a Forest Conservation Act and it cannot be cleared. But in Wayanad district of Kerala, and our Honorable MLA O.R. Kellu sir is not here. I spent a couple of days in Wayanad to understand how the development right was implemented in Wayanad. I visited many of the villages, and this is very important, because if you only focus on the tenure right, not development rights, this is going to have also serious implications for their future growth and development, because you need to have a road, you need to have basic facilities like school, education centers, and this was possible after the Forest Rights Act 2006 came into picture. Now, why did it succeed actually in case of Kerala? And here again, there are 4 factors from my analysis I found. One, there was a kind of concerted and political support, because public policy always we emphasize in the post-enactment of the law, you need to have a particular constituency which should consistently support that law, and that constituency should be a political constituency, and that I could see in Wayanad, where the local MLA was consistently following the forest department and trying to convince him that these projects are very important. The second factor that also why it succeeded in Wayanad and why it should be also replicated in other districts of Kerala, whether it is Idukki or Palakkad, where development projects are, especially these kind of projects are not getting cleared from the forest department, is because of the convergence committee at the district level. And I remember the collector at that time, I think was Geeta madam was there, and when this convergence committee was regularly meeting, and these projects were streamlined and cleared. So to conclude my sort of talk, what I want to emphasize that a progressive legislation like Forest Rights Act can make a huge difference in the socio-economic and also the cultural development of forest dwelling communities, because there is a close relationship between forest dwelling communities, land rights, and their aspiration as well as the development that are central to their livelihood. Now, in this context, if you look at, there are the following suggestions what we need to understand, because in Kerala, while development rights has been effectively implemented, there are also concerns when it comes to individual forest rights and community forest rights. So one of the important steps that I would like to highlight here, that a concerted effort should be made, because there are 725 tribal hamlet settlements in Kerala. A detailed mapping exercise must be done, so that what are the basic amenities which are absent in these tribal hamlets, so that the section 3.2 can be exercised and development projects can be brought to these places. And the second important suggestion is also the convergence committee, which is now limited to a few districts in Kerala. There should be a convergence committee, but equally important is the convergence committee. Many states, when it comes to any district committee, the district collector is the head of the committee. But he is so overloaded, or she is so overloaded, there is no time for that. So it is better to have the tribal officer as the head of the convergence committee. And the third, and which is equally important, the Forest Rights Act is also applicable to protected areas. And in Kerala, you have national parks and sanctuaries and tiger reserves, but as of now, the act has not been effectively implemented in the protected areas. But it must be, made it very clear to the local agencies that FR is applicable to all types of forests, irrespective of classification, whether it is tiger reserve, whether it is a protected forest, whether it is a village forest. And the last point is the idea of having some special grant for the Forest Rights Act. Because as all of you would be knowing, when Forest Rights Act was enacted, it was a non-financial bill. There was no dedicated budget like your Manrega, which was repealed, or Food Security Act. There was a dedicated budget for that. But for Forest Rights Act, there is no dedicated budget. Orissa became the first state in the country to have a special budget for the Forest Rights Act. So I think unless you have a special budget for the Forest Rights Act implementation, it is going to be very difficult to synergize these efforts, which require a lot of human resource as well as financial reports and capacity building of the officers. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful speech. We'll try to include it in our policy, definitely. So, അടുത്തത് ഡിസ്കഷനാണ്. നമുക്ക് സമയക്കുറവുണ്ട്, അതുകൊണ്ട് കുറച്ച് 4-5 പേർക്ക് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാം, ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ചോദിക്കാം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സജഷൻസ് പറയാം. 1 മിനിറ്റ് ഒരാൾ ചുരുക്കി പറയണം, കൂടുതൽ വിശദീകരിക്കരുത്. അപ്പോൾ യെസ്.
Good evening. My question is to Professor Geetanjoy Sahu. Regarding FRA implementation, we are also facing some issues, especially in areas where Wildlife Protection Act is also there is a conflict. So this development rights under section 3.2, Forest Department is of the view that Wildlife Protection Act provisions, despite that saving clause that of forest clearance, so many of our projects are also stuck in that. So do you have any suggestions with regard to how we can move forward? And on that note, one more help we have received is now Ministry of Tribal Affairs is actually funding us to set up FRA cell in every district. So there is some kind of institutional support.
I'll respond to this. As I said, irrespective of classification of forests, forest right is applicable to all the forest areas, whether it is tiger reserve, protected area, national park and sanctuaries. And I'll give you 2 examples. Like you have in neighboring districts, say Karnataka, where in the BRT hills, Bilgiri Ranganath Temple Tiger Reserve, in the core area, they have given more than 20 community forest rights. In the core area, many states are reluctant to give, but in the core area, because generally they say core area is inviolate area, but Karnataka, you have a very good example where they recognize. Recently in Achanak Mark Tiger Reserve of Chhattisgarh, again they have recognized more than 15 CFR titles in the core areas. Okay, but even in your own state, if you look at the Pipara Wildlife Sanctuary, is a good example. They have recognized almost 16 development rights at some point when I visited that wildlife sanctuary. So it is better to see what process they followed in the Pipara Wildlife Sanctuary, and if they recognize in Pipara Wildlife Sanctuary, why not they recognize in other, say Periyar Tiger Reserve, wherever there is development right is required, because it is applicable, because Wildlife Protection Act, even though it says certain human activities are not allowed, but in Pipara Wildlife Sanctuary and, as I said, Achanak Mark or BRT Hills in Karnataka, the process is laid down very clearly. It requires 3 weeks time. The day the Gram Sabha approves this, say for example there is a school, and this school needs to be proposed by the Education Department. Gram Sabha has to approve that, and the day Gram Sabha approves, within 3 weeks, the range officer has to go to the village, do a physical verification of that, and ensure the following: that it is less than 1 hectare. Second, you are not cutting more than 75 trees. And third, the user agency is identified. And after that, the DFO has to approve within 4 weeks. So that means maximum it will take 7 weeks of time to get a clearance for your development rights. On you no need to go to central government or to your PCCF at the state level.
Hello. Good evening also. I am Dr. Sagar. My question is to Advocate Irfan Engineer. Sir, the question is about the implementation of EWS reservation in India and its impact. What's your comment on that, sir? Thank you. EWS, reservation, and its impact on society.
I think it's reservation for upper caste through back doors. Once you allow EWS reservation, 10% reservation in most of the cases, what happens is that you get false income certificates, and the kids of rich people, upper caste rich people, will be able to access an education. They have capitation, they can pay private college fees, and they can get admission, but through EWS they will, it in fact, it's not only a question of reservation for upper caste through back door. It is also a question of challenging the whole affirmative action structure that we have developed in India. The affirmative action and reservation of jobs is only and only on the basis that Dalits were historically marginalized and oppressed. And likewise, the OBCs, if they are educationally and socially backward, there is a historical baggage to it. Now, actually, rich Dalit, for example, and rich Brahman are not in the same level. The poor Dalit and poor Brahmin are not at the same level. Their social capitals are different. The poor Brahmin has a lot of social capital in the form of scholarships, kinships, support structures from the caste, from their community, so on and so forth. So I think it is completely senseless to have EWS reservation.
Good evening. I'm Sudhir. I'm from Dicky, Dalit Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I have not questions, I have only suggestions. Like, government is giving education and house, all these facilities are giving, but they are not financially independent. So we have to promote them to make them do business. And also I suggest something, that we have that infrastructure at Mannantala. Why don't we start a business school there and skill development center? And Dicky will give 100% support on that. Rest of the my suggestions I'll send you by mail. Thank you.
Sir, I think you are referring to the Manandala, Ambedkar Bhavan, that is, presently under the SCDD department, the Scheduled Caste Development Department. So I think we do have some plans. That has been not a very encouraging, the activities over there are not very encouraging, and our minister has also been, very keen on revamping it and seeing that, some meaningful activity can happen. There are several, other coaching and other things happening there. We can definitely think of this. In fact, we are looking at, skilling as a major area, through which, it's not only, finding them jobs, also making entrepreneurs out of these people is something that the department is keen on. Probably we'll take it forward, and your suggestions are welcome. You said you will email, proposals. I think we are open to it. Thank you. Absolutely, we are not interested in our incomes, but agree. Sure. Yeah, of course, that is also something interesting.
Sir, we have heard about identity as an empowering factor at one side, and also identity should wither away because it is a monolithic form, it has a diversity within. So how do we, and the importance of continuing dialogue with the civil society. So how do we tackle this reality of identity as an empowering factor and also as a withering away necessity? How will do it?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's a very perceptive question. You want to have identity, at the same time you want identity to wither away. Identities don't wither away actually, they leave their traces. But you have to transform them. Now, you have identity which looks to be very, very particular from outside. For example, scheduled caste identity. But that identity is contained. The inner dynamics of that identity is not particular but universal. Let me give an example. And I would have given Ayyangkali's example, and I would give that, educations. Why was Ayyangkali giving education to the Dalits? Because he wanted equality, justice, freedom. All these three values are universal. But it was, the expression, articulation was given by Ayyangkali, who belonged to a particular caste. Another example, 1944, Baba Saheb Ambedkar established a party called Scheduled Caste Federation. What was the purpose? To promote equality, freedom, liberty, justice. But there was no other terminology available to him. Proletariat was not available to him, because proletariat would really talk about economics, not social. So what was immediately available to him was this, which was, there is a tension between the content and the form. How are you going to dissolve this? Well, content and the form should be same. And Ambedkar suggested that it is through comradeship and friendship actually. That you are human being as like other human being. And there is no inhibition, there is no barricade between the two of them. But that's a very ideal thing. But in real, you are forced to carry that identity on your, and I use this word, caste as a carapace. You have to carry that burden of caste in the form of a certificate. Our college students have to show certificate. Why are they? That is so coercive. They are forced to, EWS is not asked to, they feel very happy about it. EWS feel very happy because they can bandage their Brahmin certificate. Oh, I'm Brahmin, still I'm getting reservation. But a Dalit guy feels so crushed and coarse carrying his own certificate. And you find in the college lists, they remove the names, It happened in Delhi and it must be happening, I don't know. So, who is responsible for this? Unless you actually respect the right to reservation as a universal right, that identity will automatically dissolve into insignificance. But who is responsible in perpetuating identity is not Dalit. The others who actually remind you of your own identity. Oh, you are. Yeah, so, and then, some people came to me as if I was a Justice Chandru lawyer. So I am in difficulty. and you know, one person has walked out of my relationship because she discovered my caste. Now, this is the society in which we are actually. So I think, and this Dr. L.T. Rathod was this Bhiwandi community policing. I think, Mr. Minister, I think we can start doing some very intense interaction between different groups, similar way. And so see to it that you filter away, detoxify caste, gender, patriarchy, communalism, everything. But that is I think it is an initiative that should come from the society, and it should be promoted by the state in whatever form. Is that fine? It shouldn't be fine, but I'm just saying it should be fine.
I'd like to, I think it's also what Dr. Irfan has said, you know, that in where movements come together, in terms of the discussion of movements, social movements, there is a whole discussion on how, like, what is specific and what is general, and how do different communities who are marginalized come together. I mean, what is it that, you know, you respect the specificity and needs and the demands of a particular community, as well as how do you go across and transcend that and go and ally with another section which are also marginalized, you know. So I think that is a very crux of what Dr. Irfan was also trying to suggest, that, you know, and that's very important because we are talking about empowerment and social movements, you know. So whether it's a women's movement or whatever other movements, so that you do not see you as isolated units, you know, or you dismiss because you think that you're only bothered about your identity, you know. But then how do marginalized sections come together? How do marginalized sections come together? You know?
Hi, my name is Anashwara. I'm a student of ISETS, the program already sir mentioned. And I would like to seek your attention to the climate change and also the impacts of AI on the vulnerable sections of women and old age peoples, and also the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So how it will impact on them, the impacts of AI and also the climate change, and what are the policy measures we need to take, how we can tackle this.
See, when you look at the climate change problem, which is an universal problem, I don't think anybody disagrees except Donald Trump. Otherwise, everybody, you know, believes there is a serious problem, and the concern here is there are certain groups of people in the society who are more vulnerable. Okay, and when we say more vulnerable in cities, the working class, the construction workers. In rural areas, the farmers, the tribals, women, both in cities and rural areas. So as of now, every state has come up with a state climate action plan. Okay, and there are also municipal corporations which have come up with a climate action plans, like Bombay Climate Action Plan. So that there is no need of demanding for a new legislation per se, but the existing framework that we have under various environmental legislation, they have not been effectively enforced. So one is enforcement challenge. Second is also the mapping exercise, because there is interesting paper where the author says vulnerability doesn't fall from the sky. So sometimes we create vulnerability in the society through our socio-economic and political measures. Okay, so there is a need for understanding how diverse social, economic, and political groups are vulnerable in different contexts. As we were referring to the diversity index, similarly the vulnerability index is equally important to address the impact of climate change. Some of the cities have come up with their proposals and plans like how to address air quality, the pollution issues, because India, unfortunately, 10 out of 15 polluted cities in the globe are from India, and everybody only knows about Delhi, but if you look at what is happening to Faridabad or Gwalior or many such cities, so I think there is a need to recognize that there are certain groups of people are more vulnerable, and policy, while designing policies and rules and regulations, we need to recognize that the whole global climate change impacts community members in an unequal manner. So we need to recognize this, and accordingly the policy directions should be made.
I think this AI question is important because the government of Kerala also is thinking, and there is a part, I think. So in the document also you have mentioned to AI, and which is good, I think, in a way, that because it will help in terms of managing budgetary provisions, statistics, mapping, remote sensing, all important things will be taken care of by AI. There's no disagreement about that. But what impact does it have or will it have on the SCs and the STs is a question you are asking. Now, what AI does, and everyone knows, is simply, I'm not gone into in detail, it actually supplements human thinking. And it actually thinks on behalf of the human being. Now, if SCs and STs have just arrived to think on themselves, they are actually developing cognitive capacity just now. They are becoming more and more inquisitive, anxious, and searching. And they are developing their capacity to think fresh without any assistance from any mechanism, AI or what is called chat GPT and all that. What kind of damage can it do to the creativity of the untouchable, the Dalits and the tribals and women to some extent? Is this trade-off really advisable? I think I will not go for the trade-off. I will see, look here, let the SC, somebody's phone is ringing. SCs and the STs should be given full protection to think on themselves. They should be developed into some. Why can't they be philosophers? Why can't be they theoreticians? Why can't be the tantalizing policymakers? Can you do it? You can do it. It's a simulation. AI is nothing but simulation. And do you want to be the victim of simulation? And I have a very strong opinion about this. I want human being. I trust human being. I want to invest in human being. I want to invest in his thinking capacity. And that is how the human being becomes so beautiful. Thinking being, arguments. Why do you think argument and debate and dialogue? The dialogue is possible because you have no assistance of AI. And if you are a student, you know how people make their papers, how they write their term papers, how they write their dissertation. We know that. But that is, I think, a very, very false need, not a true need. We want to really have an authentic being who can think on her or his own terms. And I think the opposition to this, in terms of this, not in terms of the total criticism of AI, is coming from the US. And there are debates on this. Okay? I think this is not a very debatable, controversial, but I am ready to discuss this.
Yeah, if I may just very briefly say, AI learns what is taught to it. If upper castes control knowledge and feed into AI, the AI will also imbibe caste-based prejudices and caste-based knowledge. There is a big danger that it will empower the upper caste even more to suppress the oppressed castes and oppressed and vulnerable sections. I'm reminded of a story here in Marathi. A lion is chasing a cat in the forest. Cat quickly climbs up a tree to save itself. Lion is waiting down for the cat to come because it cannot climb the tree. It waits for 1 hour, 2 hours, and then slowly tells the cat, in Marathi, cat is supposed to be aunt of lion. So, Maushi, Maushi, aunt, please teach me how to climb the tree. So the cat answers, when I learn how to fly, I'll teach you how to climb the tree. This is what upper castes are doing with Dalits and oppressed castes. When new skills are developed or new technology develops, computer for example, or IT for example, they quickly adopt to it. They can because they have the social capital and the economic capital to do so. And when they need little bit educated servants, then they will admit Dalits to school and education, etc., etc. It's like when they learn to fly, the cat agrees that that I'll teach the lion to climb the tree.
If there are no other questions, I'll request Dr. A. Kaushigan IAS, Secretary, SCST and OBC Department of Government of Kerala, for his summary of the session.
So I was just thinking that, every passing moment, summarizing will be more and more difficult. So I'm quite happy that, we have, and, so the discussion was very vibrant, and we had very meaningful questions as well as answers coming from our speakers. So I have two things to do. One is summing up, and the other is, probably giving the way forward as the Secretary of the Department. So, Honorable Minister, Revenue was indicating about land reforms where we have done well, and the Extreme Poverty Eradication Mission, and the housing schemes where we have done about 5.25 lakh houses under the Life Mission, and our social security net. These are all, credits that Kerala can actually, be proud about. Honorable Minister for Minorities, who's with us, who has sat through the entire program. So was mentioning about the Paulalli Commission and the JB Koshi Commission for Minority Welfare, and the Minorities Scholarship Research grant that has come in as high as 7 lakhs every year. There is a Margan Deepam program. And of course, there are several others also, which I cannot probably list here. And of course, in the SCST department, it is something like, about 1,000 people have been sent abroad for their higher studies, so which is also an achievement. I mean, we spend as high as 25 lakhs per child. So that is so these people are picked up from the SCST community, and also a very few from the backward classes also. So they are sent abroad for studies. So that is the kind of benevolence that this government has been showing, so that real social empowerment happens. And moderator did point about the second generation issues that we are now keen on tackling. One is, we have achieved some kind of quantity in our efforts, but we are now looking at quality education, quality health, emerging jobs, high-end jobs, and entrepreneurship, and better incomes and so on. Justice K. Chandru was, he started with the burning of the Manusmriti that was attempted by B.R. Ambedkar ji, and he went on to indicate about the heart of the Constitution, which is Article 15, which is no discrimination based on caste, religion, etc. And he also, gave us that insight regarding the Sukanya Shantanu case, if I have picked it right. So where, according to the prison manual, it was a practice to, allocate jobs based on the caste, which is absolutely discriminatory. And when it came to the notice of the Supreme Court, it has brought it down, and now this practice is no more there. It is really, one doesn't really understand how, so many years into, freedom after independence, we still have had such retrograde practices in the statute books. So that is something which, is really worrying. But fortunately, the Supreme Court has done away with it. And he was also pointing out about denying people. It is only people who are denied who are to be empowered, and not the entire population. So he was also talking about reverse discrimination, which is an American, this one which we have actually been eloquent about. Professor Gopal Guru was quite, vocal about material good and moral good, and about arbitrary exclusion and rational exclusion. While arbitrary exclusion is reasonable, arbitrary exclusion is based on some kind of a karma theory which is not acceptable. There is another exclusion, which is rational exclusion, which is definitely, something that can be accepted. And he went on to, lay stress on the inheritance and principle, policy guided by principle. So inheritance principle and also the commitment principle, where he was eloquent about tenants being turned into peasants, and also the commitment principle, where the kudigadappu was given for what we call kudigadappu. Here what we call as kudigadappu for the people who have worked as agricultural laborers with landlords. He was also he brought this issue before us, which is a leather worker, whose skill is never talked about, but the players are always hogging the limelight. Meera madam was, of course, there were several things that madam had pointed out, of which, to be brief, how spouses, involvement of spouses helps the retention of women in their workplaces. And if the spouse doesn't help, then there is a lot of attrition. And the domestic violence, how it increases with the age of the lady. So, and there must be interventions that can bring it down. And government support to bystanders was something that madam had indicated, that unless such a support is given, people will not come forward, and they will be just onlookers. And Professor Xaksa, so Professor has, I think he has, left the program. So he was, telling us about empowerment, which is, there are two kinds of empowerment. One is legal empowerment, the other is capacity building, which is important. Advocate Irfan Engineer, among many other things, he had pointed about two Kerala's big movements. One is the Narayana Guru thing, and the other Islam movement, and how caste-based identities have become a source of continued oppression, and whether withering away of caste identity is the way to go. He indicated about the structure committee report, where he was eloquent about the diversity index, equal opportunity committee, anti-lynching law, and also constitutional principles being taught at school. So for your information, we have a very vibrant students police cadets program in the state, and we also have community policing in a big way. And Kerala is one of the lead states as far as community policing is concerned by the Home Department. And on that front, we are definitely doing well. Professor Geetanjoy was dealt about the Forest Rights Act. Of course, he was indicating about the failures, especially NGOs and wildlife groups advocating for not giving land rights to the tribals, calling this Forest Rights Act as a land grab act. So sir was also throwing light on Gadchiroli district, Kalahandi district, and also where Wayanad has done some good work under development rights. Sir, for your information, of course, we are actually doing CFR mapping. So with some Government of India support, and which I think will help us to see that we cover the entire universe without leaving room for any shortfalls. And also special grants for forest dwelling scheduled tribes, sir. In our present budget, we have set apart some money for specifically for forest dwelling scheduled tribes in our budget. So I think we are definitely taking care of your concerns. And of course, sir, we will take note of the Biligiri Rangan Hills, the manner in which CFR rights were given in a core tiger reserve area. We do have such problems in the state as well. We will, I think, probably be able to address this. So the way forward, of course, as far as I'll just wind it up in about 5 minutes, if it is okay. Yeah. So, as a state, we have a population of 9.1% belonging to the scheduled castes. We set apart about 9.8% of the planned budget for the welfare of scheduled castes. That comes to about 3,507 crores. That is the upcoming budget 2026-27. So of which the department gets to spend about 2,000 crores, and another 1,500 crores is spent through the LSGIs. When it comes to STs, the ST population is about 1.45 crores, and we set apart 2.83% of the planned budget for the welfare of the scheduled tribes. That comes to about 1,012 crores, of which 775 crores is spent by the department. Another 237 crores is spent through the local bodies. So in the budget also, we have been mindful of seeing that the most deprived among the scheduled castes are given some special consideration. We have some vulnerable scheduled castes, basically, castes like Vedar, Nayadi, Kalladi, Arundadiyar and Chakliyar. So this constitutes about 3.65% of the SC population. We have set apart separate schemes and programs for this particular vulnerable group well within the scheduled caste community. Similarly, under the tribal sector also, we have particularly vulnerable tribal groups and a few other tribal groups who are not particularly vulnerable, not classified as such, but still very backward. So for them also, we have set apart separate funds under the ST kitty, so that they are taken care of, very specifically. So when it comes to education, the way forward, we all understand that quality education is quite important. We have achieved some sort of quality. We have been able to put all ST children in school by and large. But if all these children are attaining, good, receiving good education or getting educated, their learning outcomes, are they, good? If that is the question, I think not really is the answer. So which means we are looking at universal preschooling for all ST children, especially where the first generation learner disadvantage is there. So we would like to, we have about 6,000 tribal unnatis where we would like to bring universal preschooling so that they have that, jump start in the very beginning, because about 70% of the brain development happens at about, up to about 5 years of age. We miss them there and then we go and then, catch them in their first standard. Actually, things really don't work because they are already, they themselves think that, they are of a laggard kind when it comes to other students, when it comes to, when it comes to a comparison with other students. So to break that, we are thinking of universal preschooling for all ST children. Of course, absenteeism will be addressed, and also improving grades is in our radar. Dropouts, of course, handling that. We have a very good program done by the Home Department. It's called the HOPE project, where dropouts, they are, brought back into some sort of an education, informal education system where they, complete their graduation and things like that. So that is something that the department will be scaling up. There are a lot of utility services reaching the last mile. Now unconnected habitations are getting connected with piped water as well as electricity. So that also opens up some opportunity for livelihood also, because at the last mile the maintenance of the line itself is a challenge for the utilities. So there comes an opportunity for the tribals themselves to take up some jobs, so that in the very vicinity of their homes they get some work around as a livelihood option, and that is also being explored actively by this government. Tribal healers were earlier, a no kind of thing under the allopathic medical system. They always were considered as quacks, but no more. Now ICMR has come up with a program of identifying tribal healers and using them as the people at the front line for health seeking at the Unnati level. So that is also, and already our state is probably one of the few states which have given ID cards to all these tribal healers, and they have been properly registered as well, and I think we will be able to take them forward with the support of the government of Kerala and the government of India. And biodiversity is also that which we are looking at. There are access and benefit sharing arrangements under the Biodiversity Act. So the intellectual property rights of indigenous tribal communities when it comes to tribal medicines and healing, that also we think can be capitalized, so that there is access and benefit sharing for the benefit of tribals, so that they can find some income in terms of intellectual property also. Alcoholism, de-addiction is an area where we still wish to concentrate. Nutrition, SAM, MAM, as well, and also MRS. We have a good number of model residential schools and also hostels. So here we want to provide assured minimum facilities, so that every child who goes there will get complete all-round development, including good sports facilities. So postgraduate education, finishing and job placement is also an area of where we wish to concentrate. Habitat rights, we have not done well with habitat rights, and also the community forest resource rights. We recently had a workshop on this conducted by the government of India. We have certain good examples from Chhattisgarh and so on. So we'll be working on those things, and then our department is quite committed to see that habitat rights are also recognized. Man-animal conflict is another area which the state government as a whole, along with the forest department, is tackling. That it has been declared as a state-specific disaster, so more funds are being brought into service by this declaration. The State Disaster Response and Mitigation Fund can also be now employed for this purpose. And so to sum up, it's like we are looking at empowerment, total empowerment through proper education, health, employment and entrepreneurship. And all my directors are already here. They have been sitting through the entire discussion. Definitely as a team we'll be able to take forward these suggestions, and we see that we do our best for the people of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we are coming to the last part of the session, that is vote of thanks. I request Srimati Josephine J. She is the Chief of Decentralized Planning Division of Kerala State Planning Board, to propose vote of thanks.
Our session was lucky to have 3 ministers actually. Sri O.R. Kelu sir was supposed to be here, but he was confined in some other assignments in his district, very important assignment, so he couldn't turn up. I formally extend my sincere thanks to O.R. Kelu sir, who has agreed to come to this session. Now, Sri K. Rajan, Honorable Minister for Revenue, noted the remarkable transformation achieved by the state since the formation of the first elected government and emphasized state's inclusive policies. We extend our sincere thanks to our Honorable Minister. Shri Abdul Rahman, Minister for Minority Welfare, he was throughout the session. He pointed out that state has become fast-growing development-oriented state with development-oriented state with clear and coordinated plans across departments. When union government is reducing the allocations for minority development, state government has new scholarship schemes like Chief Minister's Minority Research Scholarship and Margadeep Scholarship. He was highlighting the development schemes of the department. Our sincere thanks to our Honorable Minister. And Honorable Justice K. Chandru, he pointed out that Kerala is a national exemplar by embodying the constitutional principles of liberty, equality, justice, and fraternity, framing social empowerment as a core feature of its long-term sustainable development. He suggested that state must ensure economic and social empowerment reach every citizen, ultimately remodeling the state as a global benchmark for inclusive growth. We extend our sincere thanks to Justice K. Chandru. Professor Gopal Guru sir, he has made two propositions that division in the society has to be looked into and the gap in the society shall be minimized. He lauded the state's proactive interventions of land reforms and other interventions, policy interventions. So we extend our sincere thanks to Gopal Guru sir also. And Dr. Meera Velayudan, madam, she was constantly with us in all our development policy making. She was the chair of the working group for social empowerment, especially for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. And for a long period, she was in close association with State Planning Board. In spite of her bad health situation, she has reached here with much eager to give a presentation on social empowerment. She pointed out that while Kerala is celebrated for high social development indices, true progress requires a critical look at the paradox of gender within Kerala model. She also argued that Kerala model must evolve to address second generation challenges. Heartful thanks to you, ma'am. Virginia Kaka, he gave a good presentation on the necessity of protecting the rights of tribes in India. He pointed out that there is a concerted effort needed for the tribes in India, and also he was especially in terms of social indicators. So our heartfelt thanks to Virginia's Kaka sir. Then Irfan Engineer sir is also associating in many of our seminars in Kerala. Irfan Engineer sir emphasized that secularism in India is not merely a political slogan, but a fundamental constitutional necessity that require active intervention from both the state and civil society. Our sincere thanks to you, sir. Then Geethan Joy Sahu sir, he focused on the critical intersection of environmental justice and the rights of forest-dwelling communities, emphasizing that true development must be legally and ethically grounded. He also argued that social empowerment is incomplete without environmental democracy. We heartfully thank you, sir. And our moderator had done a very effective role in completing the session in a good manner. That means in a time-bound manner. She also emphasized and highlighted the achievements made by the state government and reiterated that inclusion and secularism are key features of Kerala's development. Our sincere thanks to you also, ma'am. And here we should give a big hand to our secretary, our Dr. A. Kaushikan sir, IAS sir, secretary of SCST Backward Classes Development Department. He has done his summarizing in a very effective manner. He has also included the schemes and the policies which are being done in the state for the development of SCST, backward and minority communities. And thank you, sir, for summing up the whole session in a very brilliant manner, sir. Thank you. And also, I extend my sincere gratitude to our respected directors of different departments. Right from the beginning till the end of the program, they are here to very keenly listening to the sessions. Thank you, sir, all the directors. And we also thank the guests, the delegates, officials, and the officials of the departments of welfare of SCST, backward classes, minorities, and also State Planning Board who are hosting the program, and also the officials of CDIT and Kerala Public Relations Department, and also the media people who are helping us to propagate this sessions in a very effective manner. And also the delegates who had raised questions, meaningful questions here. So we are winding up the session. Once more, thanks to all.